Bound by duty, freed by love. A dark romance novel. Prologue, the agreement. The lawyer's office smelled of leather and old money, the kind of place where deals worth millions were sealed with fountain pens and single malt scotch. I sat in one of the wingback chairs facing the mahogany desk, my hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling, and tried to convince myself this was just another business transaction. It wasn't working. "Miss Hartley, if you'll just sign here," the attorney said, sliding a document across the polished surface toward me. His voice was professionally neutral, as if he arranged marriages every day. Perhaps he did. "And here." An initial at the bottom of each page. I stared at the papers, the words blurring together. Marriage contract. Binding agreement. Duration. Indefinite. Dissolution. At the discretion of both parties. Subject to penalty clauses. 6 months ago, I had been completing my master's degree in art history, planning a future filled with museum work and academic conferences. I had been ordinary Olivia Hartley, daughter of a respected gallery owner, living a life that was comfortable if not extraordinary. Then my father's world had collapsed in a single devastating phone call. "Olivia!" My father's voice drew me back to the present. He sat beside me, looking older than his 58 years. The past months had carved new lines into his face, turned his dark hair almost completely gray. "You don't have to do this." The lie was kind, but we both knew better. Without this marriage, without the alliance it would create, my father would lose everything. The gallery that had been in our family for 3 generations. A home. His reputation. The vultures were already circling, creditors demanding payment on debts I hadn't known existed until they came knocking at our door. "I know," I said softly, picking up the pen. The truth was more complicated. My father had gambled and lost, made investments that turned toxic, borrowed from the wrong people. Dangerous people. The kind who didn't accept bankruptcy as an excuse and didn't wait for court proceedings to collect what they were owed. That's when Dante Blackwell had appeared, like a dark angel offering salvation with a price. I had met him only once before today, at a charity gala 2 weeks ago. He had been impossible to miss, tall and commanding, with black hair swept back from a face that belonged on ancient Roman coins. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes so dark they appeared black in certain light. He had moved through the crowd like a predator, people instinctively stepping aside to let him pass. When he approached me, I had felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. "Miss Hartley," he had said, his voice deep with a faint accent I couldn't quite place. "I've been hoping for an introduction." "Have you?" I had tried to sound casual, unaffected, even as my pulse quickened. "Your father owes a considerable sum to some associates of mine." Direct. No pretense. "I'm prepared to settle his debts in full." "Why would you do that?" "Because I need a wife." His dark eyes had held mine without wavering. "And you need a miracle." The proposition had been outrageous. Medieval. Completely insane. And yet, here I sat, pen in hand, about to sign my life away. "The terms are quite generous, Miss Hartley," the lawyer continued, apparently interpreting my hesitation as negotiation rather than existential crisis. "Mr. Blackwell has agreed to assume all of your father's outstanding debts immediately upon marriage. Additionally, you'll receive a monthly allowance, full access to the Blackwell properties, and complete financial security." Financial security. Such a clinical term for what was essentially being bought. "What does he get in return?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The lawyer cleared his throat delicately. "Mr. Blackwell requires a wife for social and business purposes. His companies have expanded into sectors that value traditional family structures. There are also matters of inheritance and corporate succession that necessitate marriage." "So I'm a prop," I said flatly. "A pretty accessory to legitimize whatever empire he's building." "You're a partner in a mutually beneficial arrangement," the lawyer corrected, his tone suggesting he'd had this conversation before. "The contract specifies that the marriage will appear genuine to outside observers." You'll reside together, attend social functions together, present a united front. Beyond those requirements, your personal lives remain your own.
Your personal lives remain your own. The careful phrasing wasn't lost on me. A marriage in name only, then a performance of the outside world, while we lived separate lives behind closed doors. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt a strange hollowness. Where is Mr. Blackwell? I asked, suddenly realizing the groom was absent from his own wedding negotiations. He had unavoidable business to attend to, the lawyer said smoothly. He sends his regrets and asks that you join him for dinner this evening at his residence to discuss the arrangements. Of course, Dante Blackwell was a man who sent proxies to handle inconvenient details like marriage contracts. I shouldn't have expected anything different. My father's hand covered mine, startling me. Livy, we can find another way. I can sell the gallery, the house, we can start over. I looked at him. This man who had given me everything, who had raised me alone after my mother died, who had sacrificed so much to ensure I had opportunities he never had. The fear in his eyes wasn't for himself. It was for me. How much does he owe them? I asked the lawyer, ignoring my father's protest. The lawyer named a figure that made my stomach clench. More than the gallery was worth. More than we could raise by selling everything we owned. More than my father could repay in several lifetimes. And the people he borrowed from are not known for their patience or mercy, the lawyer said carefully. My father's hand tightened on mine. Olivia, no, I won't let you sacrifice yourself for my mistakes. It's not a sacrifice if it's my choice, I said more confidently than I felt. I picked up the pen again. Its weight somehow significant. It's just a contract, a business arrangement. I can do this. The words rang hollow even in my own ears, but I forced myself to read the contract one more time. The terms were clear, almost coldly so. I would become Mrs. Dante Blackwell. I would live in his home, appear at his side when required, play the role of devoted wife for the world to see. In return, my father's debts would be erased, our family protected. The contract said nothing about love, nothing about fidelity beyond public appearances, nothing about the 1,000 small intimacies that made a real marriage. This wasn't a marriage. It was a merger. My hand moved across the paper, signing my name on each designated line. Olivia Margaret Hartley, soon to be Olivia Hartley Blackwell. Each signature felt like shedding a layer of my old life, my old self. When I finished, the lawyer gathered the papers with practiced efficiency. Congratulations, Miss Hartley. The ceremony is scheduled for Saturday at the Blackwell estate. Small and private, as Mr. Blackwell requested. His driver will collect you at 10 a.m. That's 3 days away, I said, reality crashing over me. Mr. Blackwell sees no reason to delay. The lawyer stood, signaling the meeting's end. He looks forward to seeing you this evening. 7 o'clock. The address is in the packet. My father and I walked out of the office in silence, stepping into the late October afternoon. The city bustled around us. People go about their normal lives, completely unaware that mine had just irrevocably changed. I'm sorry, my father said finally, his voice breaking. Livy, I'm so sorry. I took his hand, squeezing it tightly. I know, Dad. It's going to be okay. Another lie, but a necessary one. The car arrived at 6:30, a sleek black Mercedes that seemed designed to intimidate. The driver, a stone-faced man who introduced himself simply as Marcus, held the door for me without comment on my simple black dress or the death grip I had on my clutch. We drove through the city as twilight fell, leaving behind the familiar neighborhoods for increasingly exclusive areas. The Blackwell estate, when we finally arrived, took my breath away. Situated on a cliff overlooking the Sound, the house was a modern masterpiece of glass and steel, somehow both stark and beautiful. Lights glowed from within, making it look like a beacon in the gathering darkness. Or a trap. Marcus led me through a front entrance that opened into a soaring foyer with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the water view. Every surface gleamed with understated wealth. Marble floors, contemporary art, furniture that probably cost more than my college tuition. Miss Hartley, The voice came from behind me, low and smooth as aged whiskey. I turned to find Dante Blackwell, descending a floating staircase, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Even in casual clothing, he radiated power and danger in equal measure. "Mr. Blackwell," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "Dante," he corrected, closing the distance between us with predatory grace. "We'll be married in 3 days. Olivia, I think we can dispense with formalities." Up close, he was even more imposing than I remembered, tall enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes, broad-shouldered, with the kind of physical presence that dominated a room without effort. His face was all sharp angles and hard planes, handsome in a severe, almost brutal way. "Shall we?" He gestured toward what I assumed was the dining room. I followed him through the house, acutely aware of his presence behind me, the heat of his attention on my back. The dining room continued the minimalist aesthetic, a long black table set for 2, more windows framing the now dark water, a chandelier that looked like frozen lightning overhead. Dante pulled out my chair with unexpected courtesy before taking his own seat across from me. A woman I hadn't noticed before appeared with wine, pouring deep red into crystal glasses before vanishing silently. "You signed the contract," Dante said. "Not a question." "Yes." "Any regrets?" I met his dark eyes directly. Would it matter if I had? A slight smile curved his lips. "Honesty. Good. That will make this arrangement considerably easier." He lifted his wine glass in a mock toast to a mutually beneficial partnership. I raised my own glass, but didn't drink. "Why me? With your wealth and position, you could have any woman you wanted. Why buy a bride?" "Because I don't want any woman," he replied, his gaze intense. "I want one who understands that this is a transaction, one who won't harbor romantic illusions or make emotional demands. You need security. I need legitimacy. It's refreshingly simple." Simple. I repeated, the word tasting bitter. "You make it sound like hiring a contractor." "Isn't it?" He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You're providing a service, the appearance of a stable marriage. I'm compensating you generously. If we're honest about the nature of our arrangement, no one gets hurt. And if I develop expectations?" The question emerged before I could stop it. Dante's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Then you'll be disappointed. I'm not offering love, Olivia. I'm not even offering companionship beyond what our public roles require. What I'm offering is security, protection, and the resources to pursue whatever interests you wish." He paused. "In return, I expect discretion, cooperation, and your presence when needed." The woman returned with the first course. Buy me time to process his words. No romantic illusions. No emotional demands. A marriage that was really just an extended business meeting. I should have been relieved. This was exactly what I had expected, what I had steeled myself for. So why did it hurt? "I have conditions," I said once we were alone again. His eyebrow arched. "Do you?" "My father's safety is non-negotiable. Complete protection from his creditors, no exceptions. Already arranged. I want to continue my career. I've been offered a position at the Whitmore Museum. I'm taking it." "Fine, though you won't need to work." "I want to work. I need to have something that's mine." I held his gaze. "And I want my own space in this house. A room that's just mine." "You'll have the entire East Wing," he said smoothly. "I occupy the West. We'll share common areas when necessary, but otherwise maintain separate lives." It should have been perfect. Exactly the kind of arrangement I could live with. Instead, it felt like a door closing on possibilities I hadn't even known I wanted. "Why are you doing this?" I asked quietly. "Really, it can't just be about business legitimacy." For the first time, Dante's carefully controlled expression cracked slightly. Something that might have been pain, or perhaps regret, crossed his features before disappearing behind his usual mask. "Because I learned a long time ago that love is a liability I can't afford," he said finally. "This way, no one gets destroyed when all falls apart." The resignation in his voice told me there was a story there, wounds that hadn't healed. But before I could ask, his walls snapped back into place. "Eat!" he commanded, gesturing to the untouched food before us. Mrs. Chen will be offended if you don't at least try her cooking. The rest of the dinner passed in careful small talk, discussions of the wedding arrangements, my moving timeline, the social events we would need to attend. Surface-level planning for a surface-level marriage. When Marcus drove me home later that night, I pressed my forehead against a cool window and tried to convince myself I had made the right choice. In 3 days, I would become Mrs. Dante Blackwell. In 3 days, I would enter a marriage without love, a partnership without passion, an arrangement built on mutual need rather than mutual affection. It was practical, sensible, exactly what I had agreed to. So, why did I feel like I was mourning something I had never even had? The ring arrived the next morning in a black velvet box, a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds, clearly antique, clearly priceless. No note, no explanation, just a physical reminder of the contract I had signed. I slipped it onto my finger, the weight foreign and significant. In 3 days, everything would change. I just had no idea how much.
Chapter 1: The Cage. The morning of my wedding arrived with deceptive normalcy. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, birds sang in the oak tree outside, and the smell of coffee drifted up from the kitchen where my father was undoubtedly wearing a path in the floor tiles. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the girl I had been 3 days ago with the woman who would become Mrs. Dante Blackwell in a matter of hours. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. Car will arrive at 9:45. Bring only personal items. Everything else has been arranged. Efficient. Personal. Exactly what I should have expected from a man who approached marriage like a corporate merger. I forced myself out of bed and into the shower, letting the hot water pound against my shoulders as I tried to wash away the knot of anxiety in my stomach. Didn't work. By the time I emerged, wrapped in my old terry cloth robe, the reality of what I was about to do had settled over me like a physical weight. The dress hanging on my closet door seemed to mock me with its beauty. I had expected something simple, perhaps even cold, given the nature of our arrangement. Instead, Dante had sent a gown that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. Ivory silk with delicate lace sleeves, fitted through the bodice before flowing into a graceful skirt. Elegant without being ostentatious. Beautiful without trying to be anything other than what it was. Made me want to cry. Livy. My father's voice came through the door, tentative. Can I come in? Yeah, Dad. He entered carrying 2 mugs of coffee, one of which he pressed into my hands. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face drawn. He hadn't slept, I realized. Probably hadn't slept properly since the day I signed that contract. You look like hell, I said softly. Right back at you, sweetheart. He attempted a smile that didn't quite land. Last chance to run. I'll handle the consequences. We both knew that wasn't true. The consequences weren't something he could handle, not anymore. But I loved him for offering anyway. I'm not running, I said, setting down my coffee to take his hand. This is my choice, Dad. My decision. It shouldn't have to be. His voice cracked. You should be marrying someone you love, someone who loves you. Not this. Not this. A marriage without love to a man who had explicitly stated he had no interest in emotional connection. A transaction dressed up in silk and lace. Maybe love is overrated, I said, trying to inject some lightness into my tone. Mom loved you, and losing her nearly destroyed you. At least this way, no one gets their heart broken. My father's eyes filled with tears. Oh, Livy. Love was worth every moment of pain that came after. Don't let my grief convince you otherwise. Before I could respond, before I could examine the uncomfortable truth in his words, my phone buzzed again. Car is waiting. I need to get dressed, I said, pulling away from his embrace. Can you give me a few minutes? He nodded, squeezing my shoulder once before leaving me alone with the dress and my racing thoughts. The dress fit perfectly, of course. Dante Blackwell seemed to be a man who didn't tolerate imperfection in any form. I left my hair down in loose waves, a small rebellion against the controlled perfection of everything else, and applied minimal makeup. If I was going to be a bought bride, I would at least look like myself. The emerald engagement ring caught the light as I reached for my small overnight bag. I had packed carefully, selecting only items that felt like me, things that would remind me of who I was before I became Mrs. Dante Blackwell. Marcus was waiting by the Mercedes, his expression as impassive as ever. My father stood on the porch, looking older and more fragile than I had ever seen him. "I'll call you tonight," I promised, hugging him tightly. "Be happy, Livy," he whispered against my hair. "Find a way to be happy." The drive to the Blackwell estate felt both endless and far too short. Marcus maintained his silence, which I appreciated. I wasn't sure I could have managed small talk while my stomach churned with anxiety and my mind replayed Dante's words on a loop. "I'm not offering love, Olivia." The estate looked different in daylight. Less forbidding, perhaps, but no less imposing. The modern architecture seemed to challenge the traditional landscape around it, all sharp angles and glass walls that refused to apologize for their presence. A woman waited at the entrance, late 50s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. She wore a simple black dress and an air of quiet authority. "Miss Hartley," she said warmly as Marcus opened my door. "I'm Eleanor Price, the house manager. Welcome to Blackwell House." "Thank you," I managed, accepting her outstretched hand. "Mr. Blackwell is in his study handling some last-minute business." She took my bag from Marcus with practiced efficiency. "The ceremony will be in the garden at 11. I'll show you to your suite so you can freshen up." My suite. Already, they were establishing the separate territories Dante had promised. Eleanor led me through the house, her low heels clicking on marble floors as she maintained a steady stream of information. "Dinner is typically at 7, but you're welcome to dine in your rooms if you prefer. Mrs. Chan is an excellent cook and very accommodating of dietary restrictions. The gym is on the lower level, the library on the second floor. Mr. Blackwell keeps an office here but spends most weekdays at the downtown headquarters." She spoke as if this were a hotel orientation rather than my wedding day, and somehow that made it easier to breathe. The east wing was as stunning as the rest of the house. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the Sound, the morning light dancing off the water in hypnotic patterns. Eleanor opened a set of double doors, revealing what could only be described as a luxury apartment. "Your bedroom," she said, gesturing to a space dominated by a massive bed with a wrought iron headboard. "Your bathroom is through there, walk-in closet to the left. The sitting room is just beyond, and there's a private terrace if you need fresh air." I walked slowly through the rooms, trying to process the reality of this being my new home. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and impersonal, like a page from a design magazine. "Mr. Blackwell had the closet stocked with basics," Eleanor continued, opening the closet door to reveal more clothes than I had owned in my entire life. "Sizes based on the measurements from your dress fitting. If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, we can arrange exchanges. This is..." I trailed off, unsure how to finish. "Too much. Overwhelming. A gilded cage." "I know it's a lot," Eleanor said gently, and for the first time, I saw something like sympathy in her eyes. "But you'll adjust. Everyone does. Everyone does." The words suggested I wasn't the first woman to feel overwhelmed by Dante Blackwell's world. I wondered about the story there but didn't ask. "The ceremony," I prompted instead. "Small as requested. Just the officiant, 2 witnesses, and the necessary legal representatives." He checked her watch. "You have about 30 minutes. Can I bring you anything?" "Tea. Coffee. Something stronger." "Coffee would be great, actually." After Eleanor left, I sank onto the bed, the silk dress pooling around me. 30 minutes. In 30 minutes, I would be married to a man I barely knew, bound by a contract rather than love. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend Maya. "Still time to steal a car and head for Mexico. I have tequila and a getaway plan." Despite everything, I smiled. Maya had tried desperately to talk me out of this, had offered her own meager savings, had even suggested we could move to another city and start over. But she didn't understand the kind of debt my father had accumulated, the kind of people he owed money to. "Can't run in this dress," I texted back. "Too much fabric." "Then I'll come kidnap you. Say the word." "Okay," I lied. "Really? It's going to be fine." The 3 dots indicating she was typing appeared and disappeared several times before her response finally came. "Call me tomorrow. First sign he's a psycho, I'm calling the police and your dad." "Ill." Eleanor returned with coffee in a delicate china cup, along with a small pastry I couldn't imagine eating. My stomach was twisted in knots, my hands trembling slightly as I accepted the cup. "Nervous?" she asked, not unkindly. "Terrified," I admitted. "That's normal." She sat on the chair near the window, a surprisingly informal gesture. "Mr. Blackwell can be intense. But he's not unkind, Miss Hartley. He has his reasons for the way he is." "Everyone has reasons," I said. "That doesn't make this any less surreal." "No," she agreed. "It doesn't. But for what it's worth, I've worked for Mr. Blackwell for 5 years. I've never known him to be cruel or dishonest. Whatever arrangement you've made, he'll honor it. Honor it. Keep his part of the bargain. Maintain the facade of marriage while we lived separate lives under the same roof. That's comforting, I suppose. It's more than some can say." Eleanor stood, smoothing her dress. "It's time, Miss Hartley." The garden was beautiful in a stark, minimalist way that reflected the house's aesthetic. Geometric paths wound through carefully cultivated beds, leading to a stone terrace overlooking the water. White chairs had been arranged in 2 small rows, though only 4 people occupied them. 2 men in dark suits I assumed were lawyers, and an older woman who must have been the second witness. And at the end of the short aisle, waiting beneath an arch of white roses, stood Dante Blackwell. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than my first car. His dark hair swept back, his expression unreadable. As I approached, Eleanor having offered me her arm in the absence of my father, his eyes tracked my movement with an intensity that made my breath catch. This was really happening. The officiant, a pleasant-faced man who seemed determined to inject warmth into the clinical proceedings, smiled at us both. "Shall we begin?" The ceremony was brief, stripped of the emotional rhetoric that usually accompanied weddings. No mentions of love or cherishing. No promises about sickness and health. Just the legal minimums, the binding words that would make us husband and wife in the eyes of the law. "Do you, Dante Alexander Blackwell, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was steady, certain, revealing nothing. "And do you, Olivia Margaret Hartley, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" I looked up at Dante, searching his dark eyes for something, anything, that might tell me I wasn't making a terrible mistake. His expression remained impassive, but there was something in the set of his jaw, a tension that suggested this affected him more than he wanted to admit. "I do," I heard myself say. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The officiant smiled. "You may kiss the bride." Dante's hand came up to cup my face, his touch surprisingly gentle. He leaned down slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted. I couldn't, was frozen in place as his lips met mine in a kiss that was meant to be ceremonial but sent electricity racing down my spine. It lasted only seconds, but in those seconds I felt something shift. Something dangerous and entirely too real. When he pulled away, his eyes were darker than before, a storm brewing behind the controlled facade. "Mrs. Blackwell," he said softly, and I couldn't tell if it was mockery or something else entirely. The witnesses offered perfunctory congratulations. Papers were signed, making everything legal and binding. Eleanor appeared with champagne, though no one seemed particularly interested in celebrating. "I need to return to the office," Dante said, checking his watch with the same casual disregard he might show to any other appointment. "There's a situation that requires my attention." Course there was. Why would his wedding day be any different from any other day? Eleanor will help you settle in, he continued, already turning away. I'll be back for dinner. 7 o'clock. Wait, I said, the word emerging sharper than intended. He paused, looking back at me with one eyebrow raised. That's it. You're just leaving. I have obligations, Olivia. Surely you understand that business doesn't pause for personal matters. This isn't a personal matter, I shot back, surprising myself with the anger in my voice. This is our wedding day. Our wedding day that you arranged, that you insisted on, and now you can't even spare a few hours. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, that I had challenged him. Would you prefer I stay? Make small talk over champagne and pretend this is a love match? The cruelty in his words stung more than I wanted to admit. I would prefer you show a modicum of respect for the commitment we just made, even if it is just a business arrangement. For a long moment we stared at each other, the tension crackling between us. The witnesses had already slipped away, sensing the conflict. Only Eleanor remained, hovering at a discreet distance. Finally, Dante's expression softened fractionally. You're right. That was discourteous. He pulled out his phone, typing quickly. I'll have my afternoon cleared. We'll have lunch together. Give us an opportunity to discuss expectations. It wasn't an apology, but it was a concession. More than I had expected, honestly. Fine, I said, trying to match his cool tone even though my heart was racing. Lunch. Eleanor, please have Mrs. Chen prepare something for the terrace. He turned back to me. I need to make a few calls. I'll meet you in 30 minutes. He strode away before I could respond, leaving me standing alone in the garden in my wedding dress, a wife in name only to a man I didn't understand. He's not used to being challenged, Eleanor said quietly, appearing at my elbow. Most people are too afraid of him to push back. Should I be afraid of him? Yes. No, she said after a pause. But you should be careful. Mr. Blackwell doesn't let people in easily. And when he does. She trailed off, her expression troubled. Well, let's just say he has reasons for the walls he's built. I looked down at the emerald ring on my finger, the physical symbol of a marriage built on contracts rather than connection. We all have reasons, Eleanor. That doesn't make this any easier. No, she agreed softly. It doesn't. 30 minutes later, I sat on the terrace in jeans and a simple sweater, having changed out of the wedding dress that felt like a costume for a role I didn't know how to play. The view was stunning, the sound stretching out before me, sailboats dotting the blue water, the distant city skyline hazy in the afternoon sun. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself with lunch. A spread of delicate sandwiches, fresh fruit, an elegant salad, and what appeared to be homemade lemonade. Far too much food for 2 people, but perhaps that was the point. Fill the table so we wouldn't have to fill the silences. Dante appeared exactly 30 minutes after he'd left, having changed into dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that somehow made him look more approachable. Less like a corporate titan and more like an actual person. Thank you for waiting, he said, taking the seat across from me. Did I have a choice? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. There's always a choice, Olivia. You could have taken one of the cars and left. Without knowing how to drive a car that probably costs more than most houses. I'd hate to scratch the paint. This time his smile was real if brief. Practical. I appreciate that. He served himself some salad with precise movements. Eleanor said you handled the morning well. No hysterics, no second thoughts. Would it have mattered if I'd had second thoughts? The papers are signed. The deed is done. Legally, yes. But I'm not a monster, Olivia. If you're truly miserable, we can discuss alternatives. I studied him, trying to understand this man I had married. He sat with perfect posture, ate with careful precision, and maintained an emotional distance that felt practiced. But there were cracks in the armor. The way his jaw tightened when I challenged him. The flash of something in his eyes when he'd kissed me. The concession of clearing his schedule when I called him out. What happened to you? Asked suddenly. What made you this way? His fork paused halfway to his mouth. This way. So controlled. So determined to keep everyone at arm's length. You said you learned that love is a liability. Who taught you that? For a moment, I thought he would shut down, dismiss the question as too personal. But instead, he set down his fork and met my eyes directly. Her name was Isabel, he said quietly. We were engaged. I was 25, stupid enough to believe that love was enough to overcome any obstacle. His expression hardened. I was wrong. What happened? She died. The words were flat, emotionless, but I could see the pain beneath. Killed by men who wanted to hurt me. They succeeded. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Dante, I'm so. Don't. He cut me off, his voice sharp. Don't pity me. I learned a valuable lesson. In my world, love is a weakness. Gives your enemies a target. It makes you vulnerable. His eyes held mine. That's why this arrangement works, Olivia. You're protected by our marriage, but there's no emotional attachment for anyone to exploit. That's not living, I said softly. That's just existing. It's surviving, he corrected. There's a difference. We ate in silence for a while, the weight of his revelation settling between us. I wanted to ask more, to understand the man beneath the armor, but I could see he had retreated behind his walls again. Tell me about your museum position, he said finally, clearly changing the subject. Eleanor mentioned you start next week. I accepted the shift, recognizing it for the olive branch it was. I'll be working in the Renaissance collection. Research mostly, some curation. It's what I've always wanted to do. The Whitmore is an excellent institution. You'll do well there. You know it. I sit on the board. He said it casually, as if everyone sat on museum boards. I'll make sure they understand that your position is based on merit, not our connection. I won't have people questioning your credentials. The protectiveness in his tone surprised me. Thank you. That matters. You have considerable talent, Olivia. I reviewed your thesis. The analysis of Caravaggio's use of light was impressive. I stared at him. You read my thesis. I don't enter into arrangements blindly. I wanted to know who you were beyond your father's debts. He took a sip of lemonade. You're intelligent, educated, and passionate about your work. Those are qualities I respect. But not love, I couldn't help saying. His eyes darkened. No, not love. The afternoon stretched on, our conversation staying safely in neutral territory. The house, the staff, the social obligations we would need to fulfill together. Dante explained the events we would need to attend, the people we would need to convince of our marriage's legitimacy. My business partners are traditional, he said. They value family, stability. Our marriage provides that image. So I'm window dressing, I said, not bothering to hide my bitterness. You're my wife, he corrected. There's a difference. Is there? You've made it clear this is purely transactional. Dante leaned back in his chair, studying me. What do you want from me, Olivia? Romantic gestures. Declarations of affection. That's not who I am. I want honesty, I said. You bought my compliance, but you can't buy my feelings. If we're going to make this work, even as a business arrangement, we need to be honest with each other. Fine. Honest. He leaned forward, his intensity focused entirely on me. I don't believe in love anymore. I don't trust it. But I do believe in loyalty, in protecting what's mine. You're my wife now, which means you're under my protection. No one will harm you. No one will threaten you. I will keep you safe, even if I can't give you the fairy tale ending you might have wanted. I never asked for a fairy tale, I said quietly. I just wanted a choice. You had a choice. You chose this. I chose my father's safety. That's not the same thing. Dante's expression softened almost imperceptibly. No, it's not. He stood, signaling the end of our lunch. I need to review some contracts. Eleanor will help you finish settling in. Dinner at 7. He walked away, leaving me alone on the terrace with the remnants of our wedding lunch and the growing realization that I had married a man who was as damaged as he was dangerous. And despite everything, despite his coldness and his walls and his explicit rejection of emotional connection, some part of me wanted to understand him, wanted perhaps to save him. That, I realized with a sinking feeling, might be the most dangerous thing of all. Chapter 2: Boundaries and Breaches. The first week of marriage passed in a strange limbo of polite distance and careful choreography. Dante left for the office before I woke and returned just in time for dinner, which we shared in near silence before retreating to our separate wings. We were like ghosts haunting the same house, occasionally crossing paths but never truly connecting. It should have been exactly what I expected, what I had agreed to. So why did it make me feel so hollow? I threw myself into preparing for my position at the Whitmore Museum, spending my days in the library studying the collection I would be working with. The library itself was a revelation. 3 stories of floor-to-ceiling shelves, a rolling ladder that reminded me of something from a movie, and a selection of art history texts that rivaled most university collections. Mr. Blackwell is an avid collector, Eleanor explained when she found me there on my 3rd day, surrounded by books on Renaissance portraiture. He studied art history at Oxford before returning to take over his father's business. The information surprised me. I had assumed Dante's interest in the museum board was purely financial, another asset in his portfolio. The idea that he genuinely cared about art complicated the image I had constructed of him. Why did he give it up? Yes. Art history for business. Eleanor's expression clouded. His father died unexpectedly. Mr. Blackwell was only 23. The business would have collapsed without him. She adjusted a vase of flowers on a nearby table. Sometimes duty doesn't leave room for passion. I thought about that as I returned to my books, unable to shake the image of a younger Dante being forced to abandon his dreams to shoulder responsibilities he hadn't chosen. We had that in common, at least lives redirected by circumstance rather than choice. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Week 1 survival check. Still alive. Still sane. Ready for that Mexico getaway. Alive, questionably sane, house is too nice to leave, I type back. That's what they all say before the Stockholm Syndrome kicks in. Dinner this week. Need to make sure you're really okay. Thursday. There's an Italian place downtown. Perfect. Bring your appetite and prepare for an interrogation. The prospect of seeing a friendly face, of talking to someone who knew me before I became Mrs. Dante Blackwell, filled me with more relief than I wanted to admit. Thursday evening, I was in my suite getting ready for dinner with Maya when someone knocked on my door. Not Eleanor's gentle tap or Mrs. Chen's quick double knock, but something more assertive. Come in, I called, expecting it to be Marcus with some message. Instead, Dante stepped through the door, and I froze with my earring half fastened. He was still in his work clothes, navy suit, burgundy tie loosened at the throat, and there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. Going somewhere? He asked, his eyes traveling over my black dress and heels. Dinner with a friend. I told Eleanor this morning. I finished fastening the earring, hyper-aware of his presence in my space. He had never come to this wing before, had maintained the boundaries he'd established with almost religious devotion. You told Eleanor, he repeated. Not me. You weren't here this morning. You're never here in the mornings. I reached for my clutch, trying to ignore the way his presence seemed to fill the room. Besides, I didn't think I needed permission to see my friends. You don't need permission. His voice was carefully controlled. But I would appreciate being informed when my wife plans to be out for the evening. Why? So you can maintain the appearance of knowing what I'm doing. The words came out sharper than I intended, fueled by a week of loneliness and his almost complete absence. Dante's jaw tightened. So I know you're safe. Is that so difficult to understand? I'm having dinner with my best friend, not running off to join the circus. Where? Antonio's. Downtown. We have a reservation at 7:30. He pulled out his phone, typing quickly. Marcus will drive you and wait outside. Non-negotiable. I'm perfectly capable of calling a car. Marcus will drive you, he repeated, his tone brooking no argument. Or you don't go. Those are your options. Anger flared hot in my chest. You don't get to control my every movement, Dante. That wasn't part of our arrangement. Our arrangement included your safety, which is my responsibility. He moved closer, and I caught the scent of his cologne, something dark and cedar-tinged that I had come to associate with him. You're my wife, Olivia. Whether you like it or not, that makes you a target. I won't have you wandering around the city without protection. A target for what? Your mysterious enemies. I crossed my arms. You've kept me completely in the dark about your business, but I'm supposed to just accept that I need a bodyguard for dinner with a friend? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. You want to know about my business? Fine. I own 17 companies across 4 countries. Some are entirely legitimate. Some operate in gray areas that would make you uncomfortable. I have competitors who would love to hurt me through you. I have business rivals who play by rules you can't imagine. And I have enemies who would kill you just to prove they could reach me. The brutal honesty left me momentarily speechless. So yes, he continued, his voice quieter but no less intense. You need protection. And if that inconveniences you, if that makes you feel controlled, I'm sorry. But I will not compromise on your safety. That's the one thing I can give you, even if I can't give you anything else. The raw emotion beneath his words caught me off guard. This wasn't about control, it was about fear. The same fear that had driven him to build walls around his heart, to reject emotional connections, to keep everyone at arm's length. Okay, I said softly, my anger deflating. Marcus can drive me. Dante nodded once, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. Thank you. He turned toward the door, then paused. Who are you meeting? Maya Anderson. We've been friends since college. The gallery curator. You've had me investigated, I said, not really surprised. I've had everyone in your life investigated. He said it without apology. Maya Anderson, 28, curator at the Hartwell Gallery. Unmarried, clean background. She's loyal to you, which I respect. How reassuring that my best friend passes your approval. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. She also has a concealed carry permit and a black belt in Krav Maga, according to the report. I like her already. Despite myself, I laughed. She does not have a black belt in Krav Maga. No, but I got you to laugh. The smile reached his eyes for just a moment before fading. You should do that more often. Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me standing in my suite with my heart racing and my carefully maintained emotional distance in tatters. Maya was already seated when I arrived at Antonio's, and she launched into interrogation mode before I'd even ordered wine. You look good, she said, studying me critically. Too good. Prison wife good, or actually adjusting good? I'm not a prison wife. You married a man you barely know to save your father from loan sharks. That's practically the definition of a prison wife. She leaned forward. Talk to me, Liv. What's it really like? I took a long sip of the wine the waiter had just poured. It's complicated. Complicated bad or complicated interesting? Both. Neither. I set down my glass. He's not what I expected, Maya. He's cold and distant, yes, but he's also protective. And there are moments when I see something else beneath all that control. Something wounded. Maya's expression turned serious. And you want to fix him? No. Maybe. I don't know. I picked up my menu, avoiding her knowing gaze. We barely speak. We have dinner together most nights in near silence, then retreat to opposite ends of the house. It's exactly the arrangement we agreed to. But sometimes he looks at me like I'm a puzzle he's trying to solve. Or like he's afraid of what might happen if he lets his guard down. I set the menu aside. And when he kissed me at the wedding, just for a second I felt something. Something real. Liv. Maya reached across the table to take my hand. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. And you can't fall for someone just because they're broken. I'm not falling for him, I protested, even as the words rang hollow. You're already halfway there, she said gently. I know you, Olivia. You see the wounded bird and you want to help it fly again. But this man isn't a bird. He's a hawk. And hawks have very sharp talons. He's not dangerous. Not to me. Maybe not physically. But emotionally. She squeezed my hand. Just promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't lose yourself trying to find him. I wanted to make that promise. Wanted to assure her that I had my emotions under control, that I understood the boundaries of our arrangement. But I couldn't lie to Maya. Not when I was barely managing to lie to myself. I'll try, I said finally. That's the best I can do. Marcus was waiting by the car when I emerged from the restaurant 2 hours later. Having consumed too much wine and too much truth. Maya's warning played on repeat in my mind as we drove through the city toward the estate. You can't fall for someone just because they're broken. But what if broken was all I had? The house was quiet when I arrived, most of the lights already extinguished. I assumed Dante had retreated to his wing for the night, maintaining the careful distance we had established. I was wrong. He was in the library, sitting in one of the leather chairs with a book and a glass of what looked like scotch. Still in his work clothes, though he'd removed the tie and unbuttoned his collar. The lamp beside him cast golden light across his features, softening the harsh lines of his face. He looked up as I paused in the doorway, and something in his expression made my breath catch. How was dinner? He asked, closing his book. Good. Maya sends her regards. I wasn't sure why I'd said that. Maya had done no such thing. And possibly a death threat if you hurt me. I like her more by the minute. He gestured to the chair across from him. Join me. I should have declined. Should have gone to my suite and maintained the boundaries that kept me safe from dangerous feelings. Instead, I found myself settling into the chair, kicking off my heels with a sigh of relief. Feet hurt? Dante asked. Heels are instruments of torture designed by people who hate women. A genuine smile crossed his face. I'll inform the shoe designers of your opinion. He stood, moving to the bar cart. Wine. Or something stronger. Wine would be nice. He poured us both a glass of red, then surprised me by settling onto the ottoman in front of my chair. Before I could ask what he was doing, he lifted one of my feet into his lap and began massaging the arch with firm, skilled pressure. The sensation was so unexpected, so intimate that I nearly pulled away. But it felt too good to stop. You don't have to do that, I managed. I know. His hands worked magic, finding knots I hadn't known existed and kneading them away. But you looked uncomfortable, and I find I don't like seeing you in pain. Even though pain is part of our business arrangement. His hands stilled for a moment. I never wanted to cause you pain, Olivia. That was never the intention. Just emotional distance and mutual benefit, I said, the wine loosening my tongue. A marriage without the messy parts like feelings and connection. Yes. His hands resumed their work, moving to my other foot. That was the plan. Was. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then softly. I find the plan is more difficult to maintain than I anticipated. My heart stumbled. What do you mean? Dante looked up at me, and in the lamplight, his eyes were less black, more deep brown. Warmer than I'd ever seen them. I mean that you're not what I expected. I thought this would be simple, a business arrangement with clear parameters. But you challenge me. You push back when others wouldn't dare. You see through the walls I've built and refuse to be intimidated by them. Is that a problem? I don't know yet. His hand slid up to my ankle, the touch no longer purely therapeutic. I told myself I could keep you at a distance, that I could maintain the boundaries necessary to protect us both. But then you look at me like you're trying to understand rather than judge, and it becomes harder to remember why distance is necessary. The air between us felt charged, electric with possibilities I shouldn't have been considering. "Dante," I whispered, not sure if it was a warning or an invitation. He seemed to shake himself, releasing my foot and standing abruptly. "It's late. You should rest." "Wait." I stood as well, unsteady in more ways than one. "You can't just say something like that and walk away." "I can't." His smile was bitter. "I'm very good at walking away, Olivia. It's staying that I've never mastered. Because of Isabel." The name hung between us like a ghost. Dante's expression shuttered, the walls slamming back into place with almost audible force. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't try to psychoanalyze me or fix me or whatever it is you think you're doing. I'm not trying to fix you. I'm trying to understand you." "Why?" The question emerged almost violently. "Why does it matter? We have an arrangement that works. Why complicate it?" "Because I'm not a robot." The words burst out of me, fueled by wine and frustration and a week of loneliness. Because I can't just turn off my emotions and pretend this is purely transactional. Because when you touch me even just to massage my feet I feel something. And I think you do too. Dante stared at me, something fierce and conflicted warring in his expression. For a moment, I thought he would close the distance between us, would acknowledge the attraction that had been building beneath our careful civility. Instead he stepped back. "You're right," he said, his voice carefully controlled once more. "Which is why this can't happen again. The boundaries exist for a reason, Olivia. To protect us both. From what? From feeling something real. From getting hurt when it all falls apart." He moved toward the door. "It always falls apart. Love, connection, trust, they're all temporary illusions that end in pain. I won't put either of us through that." "You're a coward," I said, the accusation slipping out before I could stop it. He turned back, his eyes flashing. "Excuse me. You heard me. You're a coward. You hide behind these walls and call it protection, but really you're just afraid. Afraid to feel anything because you might get hurt again. You know nothing about what I've been through." His voice was dangerously quiet. "Then tell me." I stepped toward him. "Stop hiding behind this armor and tell me what happened. Tell me about Isabel, about why you're so convinced that love is a liability. Let me in, Dante." For a moment, something cracked in his carefully maintained facade. Pain, raw and visceral, flickered across his features. "She screamed," he said finally, the words seeming to tear from him against his will. "When they killed her, she screamed my name, begged me to save her. And I couldn't." His hands clenched at his sides. "I had all the money, all the power, all the resources in the world, and I couldn't save the woman I loved. So they cut her throat while I listened over the phone." The horror of it stole my breath. "Oh my God. Dante. Don't." He held up a hand, stopping me. "Don't offer sympathy or comfort. I'm telling you this so you understand why the boundaries are necessary. Why I can't, won't, let anyone get close enough to be used against me again. My enemies knew exactly how to hurt me because they knew where I was vulnerable. I won't make that mistake twice. So you'll just live half a life, never connecting with anyone, never letting yourself feel anything. If that's what it takes to keep people safe, yes." His jaw set in a stubborn line. "I learned my lesson, Olivia. Love is a weapon. The moment someone matters to you, they become a target. I won't put anyone through what Isabel went through. Especially not you." The admission that he was trying to protect me, not just himself, shifted something in my understanding of him. "That's not love," I said softly. "That's fear. Maybe they're the same thing." He left before I could respond, his footsteps echoing through the quiet house. I stood alone in the library, surrounded by books and shadows, trying to process everything he'd revealed. Dante Blackwell wasn't just emotionally distant by choice. He was traumatized, convinced that anyone he cared about would meet the same fate as Isabel. His coldness was armor. His boundaries were protection, not for himself but for others. For me. Maya's warning echoed in my mind. You can't fall for someone just because they're broken. But it was too late for warnings. I was already falling, drawn to the wounded man beneath the controlled exterior, the one who massaged my feet and cleared his schedule when I challenged him, the one who tried so desperately to keep me at a distance to keep me safe. I was falling for Dante Blackwell, and I had no idea how to stop. The next morning, I woke to find an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a handwritten note on heavy cardstock. Olivia, I apologize for my outburst last night. You deserved better than having my past weaponized against your very reasonable desire for connection. I'm hosting a business dinner next Friday at the house. My partner's from the Singapore office. Your presence would be appreciated, but if you'd prefer to avoid the obligation, I'll understand. The rest of your belongings from your father's house will be delivered today. Eleanor will ensure they're placed where you prefer. The formality of it, the careful distance re-established through written words, should have frustrated me. Instead, I found myself studying his handwriting, bold, precise strokes that somehow revealed more than he probably intended. He was trying to retreat, to rebuild the walls I'd breached last night. I wouldn't let him. Not because I wanted to fix him or save him, but because beneath all his careful control, I'd glimpsed something worth fighting for. A man capable of deep feeling despite his determination to suppress it. A man who protected rather than possessed. Who carried his trauma like armor but occasionally let it slip. A man I was dangerously close to falling in love with, arranged marriage or not. I picked up my phone and texted him. I'll be at the dinner. And thank you for arranging the delivery. That was thoughtful. His response came almost immediately. It was practical, not thoughtful. Can't it be both? A long pause, then, perhaps. It wasn't much. Just a small crack in his defenses. But it was enough. For now it was enough. The week passed in a strange dance of approach and retreat. Dante maintained his careful distance during the day. But our dinners grew longer, our conversations deeper. He asked about my work at the museum, my plans for the Renaissance collection, my thoughts on the restoration project the board was considering. I learned that he'd minored in Italian art history, that he could discuss the symbolism in Botticelli's work with genuine passion, that he'd donated several pieces to the museum's collection anonymously. Why anonymously? I asked one evening over Mrs. Chen's exceptional cocoa vin. Because I don't need the recognition. He cut his chicken with precise movements. The art deserves to be seen and studied. My name attached to it is irrelevant. Most donors would disagree. I'm not most donors. His eyes met mine. I do things because they matter, not because they'll be noticed. Like paying off my father's debts. Like protecting me from threats I didn't fully understand. Like maintaining boundaries he clearly struggled with because he thought it kept me safer. Friday arrived too quickly. I spent the day with Eleanor, learning about Dante's business partners and what would be expected of me at dinner. 6 couples, all from Singapore. All important to an expansion deal Dante had been working on for months. They're very traditional, Eleanor warned as she helped me choose a dress from the extensive wardrobe Dante had provided. They value family, respect for hierarchy, and they'll be watching you closely to gauge the strength of your marriage to Mr. Blackwell. So, I need to be the perfect wife. You need to be convincing. She pulled out a midnight blue dress with a modest neckline and elegant lines. This one. Sophisticated but not showy. As I dressed that evening, I felt like I was preparing for battle rather than dinner. My first real test as Mrs. Dante Blackwell. My first opportunity to prove I could play the role I'd been contracted for. The nerves churning in my stomach had nothing to do with meeting strangers and everything to do with seeing Dante in his element, watching him perform the role of devoted husband when we both knew it was just an act. Or was it? After the past week, after the late-night conversations and the foot massage and the careful way he asked about my day, I wasn't sure anymore where the performance ended and reality began. I took one last look in the mirror. Hair swept into an elegant updo, minimal makeup, the blue dress fitting like it had been made for me, and headed downstairs to become the wife Dante Blackwell needed me to be. Even if it meant pretending the feelings growing between us were just part of the show. Chapter 3: The Performance. Dante was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, and the sight of him made my breath catch. He wore a tailored black suit with a crisp white shirt, no tie, the top button undone in a calculated casualness that somehow made him look more devastating than formal wherever could. His hair was swept back, revealing the sharp angles of his face, and when he looked up at me descending the stairs, something flickered in his eyes that made my pulse quicken. "You look beautiful," he said, and for once there was no calculation in his tone, no performance. Just honest appreciation that sent warmth flooding through me. "Thank you." Eleanor helped. I reached the bottom of the stairs, suddenly conscious of the way the dress hugged my curves, the way his eyes tracked the movement. Eleanor has excellent taste. He offered me his arm, the gesture formal but the touch anything but. Even through the fabric of his jacket, I could feel the heat of him, the coiled strength. "Are you ready for this? To pretend to be madly in love with you in front of a dozen strangers?" Absolutely terrified. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "We don't need to pretend madly in love. Contentedly married will suffice." His hand covered mine where it rested on his arm. "But we do need to convince them this is real. Can you do that?" I looked up at him, at the careful mask he wore so well, and wondered if he was asking about the dinner or about us. "I can be convincing when I need to be." "Good." His thumb traced a small circle on the back of my hand, a gesture so subtle I might have imagined it. "The Lees are traditional but kind. The Tangs can be judgmental. The Wongs are watching to see if this marriage is a strategic move or genuine. I need them to believe it's genuine." "Why? What's at stake?" "Approximately $200 million in development deals, access to Southeast Asian markets, and the legitimacy I need to transition more of my holdings into legal enterprises." He said it matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather rather than a fortune. "They won't do business with someone they perceive as unstable or purely mercenary. The marriage helps, but only if they believe it's real. No pressure then. You'll be fine." His eyes held mine. "Just be yourself. That's more than enough." Before I could analyze what he meant by that, the doorbell chimed. Eleanor appeared from the dining room, smoothing her dress. "They're arriving, Mr. Blackwell." Dante's hand tightened briefly on mine, a fleeting gesture of solidarity or perhaps warning, then he was leading me toward the entrance hall, his posture perfect, his expression arranged into something warm and welcoming. The performance had begun. The Lees arrived first, a couple in their 50s, elegant and composed. Mrs. Lee took my hands in hers immediately, her smile genuine despite the assessing look in her eyes. "Mrs. Blackwell, what a pleasure to finally meet you. Dante has spoken of you so fondly." "Has he?" I glanced at Dante, who had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "He's mentioned you as well, Mrs. Lee. Your work with children's literacy programs is remarkable." Her eyes lit up. "You know of my foundation." Dante told me. "I think what you're doing is wonderful." It wasn't a lie. He had briefed me thoroughly on each couple, their interests, their businesses, even their children's names. The attention to detail was typical Dante, leaving nothing to chance. "She's been researching grants for arts education programs," Dante added smoothly, his hand coming to rest at the small of my back. The touch was possessive and gentle at once, and I had to remind myself it was for show. "She thinks your organizations might have overlapping interests." I hadn't said anything of the sort, but I followed his lead. "The museum has an outreach program that could potentially partner with literacy initiatives. Art and reading complement each other beautifully." Mrs. Lee beamed. "We must discuss this further." "Oh, Dante, she's lovely. When you said you'd married, I worried it was one of those corporate arrangements, but I can see I was wrong." Dante's hand pressed slightly firmer against my back. "Very wrong. Olivia is unexpected in the best possible ways." The other couples arrived in quick succession, filling the entrance hall with chatter and the rustle of expensive clothing. The Tangs were as cold as Dante had warned, their greeting polite but distant. The Wongs watched us with open curiosity, clearly trying to determine if this marriage was genuine. And through it all, Dante played his part flawlessly. His hand never left me, at my back, at my elbow, occasionally tangling with my fingers in a gesture that appeared unconscious but was surely calculated. He included me in every conversation, deferred to my opinions on art and culture, and looked at me with an attentiveness that would have convinced anyone we were genuinely in love. The problem was, it was starting to convince me. "Shall we move to the dining room?" Eleanor announced, saving me from spiraling further into dangerous territory. The dining room had been transformed. Candles flickered on a table set with china that probably cost more than my car, flowers arranged in low centerpieces that allowed conversation to flow freely. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself with a menu that blended Western and Eastern cuisines, each course a work of art. Dante held my chair, his hand brushing my shoulder as I sat, and I caught Mrs. Wong watching us with a small smile. "Point to us, apparently." "So, Mrs. Blackwell," Mr. Tang said once we were all seated, his tone suggesting an interrogation rather than polite dinner conversation. "Your background is in art history, I understand?" "Yes. I recently accepted a position at the Whitmore Museum." "The Whitmore?" He said it as if tasting something sour. "Surely you don't need to work, being married to Dante." The implication was clear. I was either a gold digger or foolish for continuing to work. Anger flared hot in my chest, but Dante's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently in warning. "I work because I'm passionate about art and preservation," I said evenly. "And because I believe having one's own career and identity is important, regardless of marriage." "A modern view," Mr. Tang said, making it sound like criticism. "An enlightened view," Mrs. Lee interjected smoothly. "My daughters both work despite their husbands' wealth. I raised them to be independent." "As did Olivia's father," Dante added, his voice carrying an edge that suggested the subject was closed. "Her intelligence and passion for her work are among the qualities I most admire about her." The table fell silent for a moment, everyone clearly receiving the message. Criticism of me was criticism of him. I squeezed his hand under the table in gratitude, and he squeezed back, his thumb tracing my knuckles in a gesture that felt far too real for comfort. "How did you two meet?" Mrs. Wong asked, breaking the tension. The announcement was so sudden, we were all quite surprised. I glanced at Dante, wondering how we would explain this. We'd never discussed a cover story, never coordinated our lies. "At a charity gala," Dante said smoothly. 6 months ago. Olivia was there with her father, and I couldn't look away. He turned to me as he spoke, and the way he looked at me, intense, focused, as if I were the only person in the room, made my heart stutter. This was an act, I reminded myself. Just a performance for the investors. "I spilled champagne on him," I improvised, following his lead. "All over his very expensive suit." I was mortified. "She apologized profusely," Dante continued, a genuine smile playing at his lips as if he were remembering something real. "Offered to pay for the cleaning. I told her the suit was irrelevant, but she could make it up to me with dinner." "And you said yes?" Mrs. Lee asked me, clearly charmed. "Eventually. I thought he was arrogant and presumptuous." I looked at Dante, finding it surprisingly easy to speak a truth hidden in fiction. But he was persistent, and underneath all that confidence, there was something real, something worth discovering. "She kept saying no," Dante added, his eyes never leaving mine. "For 3 weeks I asked and she refused. I'd never had to work so hard for anything in my life." "What changed her mind?" Mr. Wong asked. Dante's hand tightened on mine. "I stopped trying to impress her and just talked. About art, about dreams, about the ways we edit ourselves for the world. She saw past the person I present to everyone else and recognized the person underneath." His voice dropped slightly. "And I realized I didn't want to hide from her." The table had gone completely quiet, everyone watching us with rapt attention. But I barely noticed them. I was trapped in Dante's gaze, in the raw honesty beneath his carefully constructed story. Because he wasn't talking about some fabricated meeting at a gala. He was talking about us, about the way I'd pushed past his walls, about the connection forming despite our best efforts to prevent it. "That's beautiful," Mrs. Lee said softly, and I heard tears in her voice. "Yes," Mrs. Wong agreed. "Quite beautiful." Even Mr. Tang looked grudgingly moved. We'd done it. Convinced them. Sold the performance so well that they believed in our fictional love story. The problem was, sitting there with Dante's hand in mine, his eyes holding secrets and promises, I was starting to believe it too. Dinner continued with easier conversation after that. The business talk was minimal, focused instead on families and future plans. Mrs. Lee extracted a promise that I would visit her foundation. Mr. Wong invited us to Singapore for their son's wedding, and even the Tangs thawed slightly when discussion turned to their daughter's acceptance to medical school. Through it all, Dante was attentive without being overbearing, protective without being possessive. He touched me frequently, a hand at my back when I stood, fingers brushing mine when passing me wine. His knee pressed against mine under the table. Each touch was brief, appropriate for public viewing, and absolutely devastating to my composure. "You're doing brilliantly," he murmured at one point when the conversation had shifted to the other end of the table. His lips brushed close to my ear, sending shivers down my spine. "They're completely convinced." "Are they?" Kept my voice equally low. "Or are we just convincing ourselves?" His hand stilled where it rested on my knee. "Olivia." "Mr. Blackwell," Eleanor interrupted from the doorway. "I apologize, but you have an urgent call. Mr. Chen from the Singapore office." Dante's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Can it wait?" He said it was urgent. He stood, squeezing my shoulder as he addressed the table. "Please excuse me. Business never sleeps." He looked down at me. "I'll be right back." The conversation continued in his absence, but I felt his departure like a physical loss. Mrs. Lee engaged me in discussion about potential collaboration between the museum and her foundation, while Mrs. Wong asked about our honeymoon plans, a topic we hadn't discussed because we hadn't had a honeymoon. "We decided to wait," I improvised. "Dante's been so busy with the expansion, and I'm just starting at the museum. We thought we'd plan something special later, when we could really take the time." "Wise," Mrs. Tang said, surprising me with her approval. "Too many couples rush into elaborate honeymoons and miss the point. Building a life together is the real journey." 15 minutes passed, then 20. The dinner party was winding down, people preparing to leave, and still Dante hadn't returned. Eleanor served coffee and dessert with her usual efficiency, but I could see the concern in her eyes. Something was wrong. "Please excuse me," I said, standing. "I should check on my husband." I found him in his study, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and intense. He didn't notice me in the doorway at first, too focused on whatever crisis was unfolding. "I don't care what it costs," he was saying. "Lock down the shipment and find out who's leaking information." "No, I'll handle Reeves myself." "Because he's family now, Chen. That changes things." "Reeves, my father." As flooded my veins. Dante finally noticed me. His expression shuddering immediately. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, ending the call without waiting for a response. "What's happening with my father?" I demanded, stepping into the study and closing the door behind me. "Nothing you need to worry about." "Don't." I crossed my arms. "Don't shut me out and tell me not to worry. I heard you mention my father's name. What's going on?" Dante set down his phone with careful precision, the gesture so controlled I knew he was furious. "One of the men your father borrowed from is making noise, claiming the debt wasn't fully satisfied, that there's interest I didn't account for." "But you said." "I know what I said." His jaw was tight. "And I covered everything. This is someone trying to leverage the situation, thinking they can get more money out of me. Is my father in danger? No. He said it with absolute certainty. I've had security on him since we married. No one will touch him, Olivia. I promised you that. Relief and anger welled within me. You've had my father under surveillance without telling me? Protection, not surveillance. There's a difference. Is there? Or is this just more proof that you need to control everything and everyone around you? I was aware my voice was rising, aware that we had guests in the house, but I couldn't stop. You investigate my friends, guard my father, orchestrate every aspect of our public lives, and expect me to just accept it? I expect you to trust that I know what I'm doing. He stood, moving around the desk toward me. These aren't ordinary business rivals, Olivia. These are dangerous men who wouldn't hesitate to hurt your father to get leverage over me. So yes, I put protection in place. And I'd do it again. Without telling me. Without giving me a choice in how my own father is protected. Because you would have argued. Insisted it was unnecessary. Tried to handle it yourself. He was close now, close enough that I could see the storm brewing in his dark eyes. And that would have put you both at greater risk. You're impossible, I said, frustrated tears burning behind my eyes. You can't just make decisions for everyone around you and expect. I'm trying to keep you safe. The words exploded from him. You, your father, everyone I care about. After Isabel, after watching her die because I wasn't careful enough, wasn't thorough enough, I swore I would never let that happen again. So yes, I'm controlling. Yes, I orchestrate and plan and monitor everything. Because the alternative is unacceptable. The raw pain in his voice stopped me cold. This wasn't about control for control's sake. It was about the terror of losing someone else. The paralyzing fear that came from having failed to protect the person he loved. Dante, I said more softly. I understand you're trying to protect us. But you can't control everything. Life doesn't work that way. I can try. His hands clenched at his sides. I have to try. And what happens when you fail? Because eventually you will. No amount of planning or control can prevent every possible tragedy. Will you blame yourself? Withdraw even further? Yes. The admission was stark, honest. Because at least if I'm the one to blame, it means I could have done something differently. My heart broke for him, for this man carrying the weight of a death that wasn't his fault, convinced that enough control could prevent the universe from taking anyone else he cared about. That's not living, I said, echoing what I'd told him before. That's just existing in fear. Better to exist in fear than to lose someone else. He stopped abruptly. His eyes widening as if he'd revealed more than he intended. Someone else, you what? Pressed, my heart racing. We have guests, he said instead, the walls slamming back into place. This conversation needs to wait. No, it doesn't. Finish what you were going to say. Olivia. You were going to say love, I whispered. Someone else you love. The silence stretched between us, heavy and charged. Dante's expression was unreadable, but I could see his chest rising and falling with quickened breathing, could see the tension in his shoulders as he fought whatever he was feeling. They're waiting, he finally said, his voice rough. We need to go back. He moved past me toward the door and I caught his arm. This conversation isn't over. It has to be. He looked down at where my hand gripped his sleeve. For both our sakes, it has to be. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in his study with my racing heart and the devastating realization that the feelings growing between us weren't one-sided. Dante Blackwell was falling for me too. And it terrified him. By the time I composed myself and returned to the dining room, the guests were preparing to leave. Dante stood by the door, accepting handshakes and making promises about upcoming meetings, every inch the successful businessman. But I could see the tension in his jaw, the careful control he exerted over every movement. There you are, Mrs. Lee said warmly, pulling me aside as her husband retrieved their coats. I hope everything is all right. Business calls are so inconvenient. Everything's fine, I lied. Just a minor issue that needed attention. You're very understanding. She squeezed my hands. Many wives would resent the interruptions. But I can see you understand that Dante's work is important. I do. I glanced at where he stood, watching him charm the Wongs with easy confidence. Even when I wish he didn't have to carry it all alone. Mrs. Lee's eyes softened. He's lucky to have you. I can see that you care for him truly. Not for his wealth or position, but for the man himself. Is it that obvious? To someone who's been married for 35 years. Yes, she smiled. And I can see that he cares for you as well, though he's trying very hard not to. Give him time, dear. Men like Dante need time to learn that love isn't always a liability. Her words echoed in my mind as I stood beside Dante, saying goodbye to each couple, playing the role of gracious hostess. His hand found the small of my back again, a touch that had become familiar over the course of the evening, and I allowed myself to lean into it slightly. He glanced down at me, surprise flickering across his features before he masked it. But his hand pressed more firmly against my back, pulling me fractionally closer. When the last guest finally left, when the door closed behind Mr. and Mrs. Tang, Dante stepped away as if I'd burned him. Well done, he said, his tone businesslike. They're convinced. The deal should proceed smoothly. Is that all you have to say? What else would you like me to say? He moved toward his study. The evening was a success. You played your part admirably. Now we can both return to our respective corners. Don't do this. Followed him. Don't pretend nothing happened in there. Don't pretend you didn't almost admit. I didn't admit anything. He whirled to face me. Because there's nothing to admit. We had a business arrangement. Tonight was part of that arrangement. Don't read more into it than what it was. You're lying. The accusation hung between us. You're lying to me and to yourself. I'm being realistic. His voice was cold now, the warmth from earlier completely gone. Tonight was a performance, Olivia. That's all it was, all it can ever be. Then why are you running away? Challenged. If it meant nothing, why can't you even look at me right now? He turned then, and the expression in his eyes took my breath away. Pain, longing, and fear wearing for dominance. Because you're right, he said quietly. I am a coward. I'm terrified of what I feel when I look at you. Terrified of how much it would destroy me to lose you. So I'm choosing to retreat to maintain the distance that keeps us both safe, even if it means. He stopped, his jaw working. Even if it means living half a life. Dante. Go to bed, Olivia. He turned away. Please. Just, go. The raw plea in his voice broke something in me. I wanted to argue, to push, to force him to acknowledge what was growing between us. But Mrs. Lee's words came back to me. Give him time. Okay, I said softly. I'll go. But Dante. Tonight wasn't just a performance for me. When you talked about not wanting to hide, about me seeing past your walls, that was real. At least for me, it was real. I didn't wait for his response. Didn't need to see his reaction. I simply walked away, leaving him alone with his demons and his walls and the truth neither of us could keep denying. Sleep was impossible. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening. The way Dante had looked at me during dinner, the possessive gentleness of his touches, the raw honesty when he'd said he didn't want to hide from me. He felt something. I knew he did. But his fear was stronger than his feelings. His trauma more powerful than his desire for connection. Someone else you love. The words played on repeat in my mind. He had been about to say it, about to admit that I mattered to him in a way that terrified him. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Dante, I'm sorry. Nothing else. Just those two words that somehow conveyed so much more. I typed back. You don't need to be sorry for being afraid. But you do need to decide if you're going to let fear dictate your life forever. The 3 dots appeared, indicating he was typing, then disappeared. Appeared again, disappeared again. Finally. I don't know how to do anything else. Then maybe it's time to learn, I sent back. No response came, but I didn't expect one. Dante Blackwell wasn't the kind of man who made decisions quickly, especially not decisions of the heart. He would retreat, process, build his walls even higher. But I had seen the cracks tonight. Had felt the real man beneath the performance. The one who was capable of love despite his determination to avoid it. And I wasn't giving up on him. Not yet. Not ever. Chapter 4: Breaking Point. The weekend following the dinner party was a study in avoidance. Dante left early Saturday morning for his downtown office, citing urgent meetings that couldn't wait. He returned late Sunday evening, long after I'd given up waiting and retreated to my suite. Monday he was gone before I woke, and Tuesday followed the same pattern. By Wednesday I was equal parts frustrated and worried. Our text exchange from Friday night had been the last communication between us. He was running exactly as I'd predicted, and I had no idea how to reach him through the walls he'd rebuilt. I threw myself into work at the museum, spending long hours in the climate-controlled storage rooms cataloging pieces for the new Renaissance exhibition. The familiar ritual of examining paintings, documenting their condition, researching their provenance. It was meditative, grounding in a way nothing else had been since I'd married into Dante's complicated world. "You're here late again," my colleague James observed, finding me still at my desk at 7 in the evening. "Third night this week. Trouble in paradise." "Just catching up," I lied, not meeting his eyes. "Right." He perched on the edge of my desk, concern evident in his expression. James was in his 40s, gay, and had taken me under his wing from my first day. "You know you can talk to me, right? Whatever it is. It's nothing. Just adjusting to married life. Married life to one of the city's most eligible bachelors. Must be rough." His tone was light, but his eyes were serious. "Liv, I may not know the details of your marriage, but I've been around long enough to recognize when someone's drowning. Are you okay?" The genuine concern in his voice nearly broke me. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know if I'm okay or completely losing my mind. Is he treating you well? Because if he's not..." "He's not hurting me," I said quickly. "Nothing like that. He's just..." How could I explain? That my husband was terrified of his own feelings. That we'd entered into a loveless arrangement that was becoming anything but. That I was falling for a man who was determined to keep his distance because he'd watched the woman he loved die. "He's complicated. Honey, men are always complicated. The good ones are complicated and worth it. The bad ones are just complicated." James squeezed my shoulder. "You need to figure out which one you've got." After he left, I sat alone in my office, staring at the Caravaggio reproduction on my wall. The artist's signature use of chiaroscuro, the dramatic interplay of light and shadow, had always fascinated me. The way he could make darkness beautiful, could find divinity in the most unlikely subjects. Dante was like that, I realized. All dramatic shadows with rare glimpses of light. And I was drawn to those glimpses like a moth to flame, even knowing I might get burned. My phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. "Mr. Blackwell will be dining at home tonight. 7:30. He asked if you join him. Not demanded. A small olive branch, perhaps. I'll be there," I typed back. I arrived home. When had I started thinking of the estate as home? With 20 minutes to spare. Just enough time to change out of my work clothes into jeans and a soft sweater, to brush out my hair and try to calm my racing heart. Dante was already in the small dining room when I arrived, standing by the windows with a glass of wine. He'd changed as well, trading his usual suit for dark slacks and a gray cashmere sweater that made his eyes look almost silver in the evening light. "Olivia!" He turned as I entered, and something in his expression made my breath catch. He looked tired, shadows beneath his eyes suggesting he'd slept as poorly as I had. "Thank you for coming. You asked." I moved into the room, accepting the glass of wine he poured for me. "I wasn't sure you would after." After I ran away like a coward. A bitter smile touched his lips. Yes, well, that seems to be my specialty lately. We stood in awkward silence, the space between us feeling both vast and negligible. Finally, Dante gestured to the table. Shall we sit? Mrs. Chen made your favorite, the sea base with lemon and herbs. She didn't have to do that. I asked her to. He held my chair, his hand briefly touching my shoulder. I owe you an apology, Olivia. Several, actually. We sat, and for a moment neither of us touched our food. Dante seemed to be gathering his thoughts, while I waited, heart pounding, for whatever he was about to say. I've been unfair to you, he began finally. I asked you to enter into this marriage with clear parameters, promised you distance and independence, then proceeded to violate both. I've been controlling, possessive, and emotionally volatile. That wasn't what you agreed to. Dante, please let me finish. He set down his wine glass. Friday night, I almost said something that would have changed the nature of our arrangement. Something that would have been deeply unfair to you, given that I won't, follow through on what such words would imply. You were going to say you loved me, I said quietly. His jaw tightened. Yes. And do you love me? The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything unsaid. Finally he met my eyes. I don't know. I know that I think about you constantly. That I find excuses to be near you even as I try to maintain distance. That watching you at that dinner party, playing your role so beautifully while also being completely, authentically yourself, it did something to me. He stood, moving to the windows as if he couldn't sit still with these admissions. I know that the thought of anything happening to you makes me feel the same terror I felt when Isabel died. And I know that feeling anything at all makes me want to run, to rebuild the walls higher, to protect us both from the inevitable pain. Inevitable? I stood as well, unable to remain seated. Why is pain inevitable? Why are you so convinced that loving someone has to end in tragedy? Because it did before. The words exploded from him. I loved Isabel. Completely, foolishly, without reservation. And that love got her killed. My enemies knew exactly how to hurt me because I was stupid enough to show them my weakness. That wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? He turned to face me, anguish written across his features. I knew what I was involved in. I knew the risks. But I loved her anyway, selfishly, without consideration for what my world might do to her. And she paid the price. So you've decided to never love anyone again? To live your entire life in this emotional prison you've built? I moved closer to him. That's not honor, Dante. That's not protecting anyone. That's just letting your enemies win. Better they win than you die. The stark honesty in his voice made my chest ache. I'm not Isabel. No. His eyes held mine. You're not. You're stronger, more independent, less willing to accept my protection without question. Which somehow makes it worse, because I can't even pretend I'm keeping you safe through control. Maybe, I said softly, safety isn't about control. Maybe it's about trust. About being honest with each other about the risks and making choices together. I don't know how to do that. The admission seemed to cost him. I don't know how to be anything other than what I am. Someone who needs to control everything because the alternative is chaos and loss. I closed the remaining distance between us, close enough now that I could feel the heat radiating from him. Then learn. Let me help you learn. And if I can't? His hand came up, cupping my face with a gentleness that contradicted his words. What if this is all I am, Olivia? What if I'll always be too damaged, too controlling, too afraid to give you what you deserve? Then we'll figure it out together. I leaned into his touch. But you have to stop running. You have to at least try. For a moment, I thought he would pull away again, would retreat behind his walls and leave me standing alone. Instead, he leaned down, his forehead resting against mine. His breath warm against my skin. I'm terrified, he whispered. I know. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. His thumb traced my cheekbone, the touch achingly tender. What if I hurt you? What if you don't? The question seemed to break something in him. His lips found mine in a kiss that was nothing like the ceremonial one at our wedding. This was desperate, hungry, full of all the emotion he'd been trying so hard to suppress. His hand slid into my hair, pulling me closer, and I pressed against him, my hands fisting in his sweater. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were dark with desire and something that looked like wonder. "Olivia," he breathed, my name a prayer and a curse wrapped into one. "Don't run," I said, my hands still tangled in his sweater. "Not this time. Please." He kissed me again in answer, slower this time but no less intense. His hands traced down my spine, pulling me flush against him, and I felt the last of his careful control beginning to slip. "We should stop," he murmured against my lips, even as his hands contradicted his words. "This complicates everything." Everything was already complicated. "I don't want to hurt you." "Then don't." I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "Stay with me tonight. Not in separate wings, not maintaining careful distance. Just stay." Something flickered across his expression. Hope, fear, and desire all at once. "You're sure?" In answer, I took his hand and led him toward the stairs. Toward my suite, my bedroom, my bed. He followed without resistance, his hand tightening on mine as if afraid I might disappear. My suite felt different with Dante in it. His presence filled the space, making the room that had been my sanctuary feel suddenly intimate, charged with possibility. We stood in the middle of the bedroom, the lamp casting golden light across us both, and suddenly I felt nervous. "We don't have to," Dante began, but I silenced him with a kiss. "I want to," I said against his lips. "I want you." His control broke entirely then. He kissed me with an intensity that stole my breath, his hands sliding under my sweater to find bare skin. I gasped at the contact, at the heat of his palms against my back, and heard him make a sound that was almost a growl. "You're sure?" he asked again, even as he was pulling my sweater over my head. "Dante, if you ask me one more time, I need to know you want this. That you're not just trying to fix me or save me or—" "I want you," I interrupted, my hands working at the buttons of his shirt. "Not the version of you that you think you should be. Not some healed, undamaged version. Just you. Exactly as you are." The words seemed to undo him. He lifted me, carrying me to the bed with a grace that belied his size, and then his weight was pressing me into the mattress, his mouth tracing fire down my throat. What followed was a revelation. Dante made love the way he did everything else, with intense focus and meticulous attention to detail. He learned my body like he was memorizing a map, discovering what made me gasp, what made me arch, what made me cry out his name. And when he finally moved inside me, when we came together with a synchronicity that felt inevitable, I saw something in his eyes that took my breath away. Vulnerability. Raw, unguarded emotion that he'd kept hidden behind all his walls. "Olivia!" He breathed against my throat, my name a benediction. "I'm here," I whispered back. "I'm right here." Afterward we lay tangled together, his head resting on my chest, my fingers trailing through his hair. The silence between us was comfortable now, no longer weighted with all the things we weren't saying. "I'm still terrified," he said finally, his voice rough. "I know. This doesn't fix anything. I'm still damaged, still controlling, still." "I know," I repeated gently. "But it's a start. You stayed. You let me in. That's more than I expected." He raised his head to look at me, his eyes searching mine in the dim light. "What are we doing, Olivia?" "I don't know. Figuring it out as we go." I traced the line of his jaw. "Is that okay?" "It has to be. Because I don't know how to go back to separate wings and polite distance. Not now." His hand splayed across my ribcage, possessive and tender. "Not after this." "Then don't." I pulled him back down for a kiss. "Stay tonight. Really stay. All right. He settled beside me, pulling me against his chest. But in the morning we'll figure things out, I said. Together. He didn't respond, but his arms tightened around me, and I felt him press a kiss to the top of my head. It was enough. For now it was enough. I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and an empty bed. For a moment panic seized me. He'd run again, retreated back to his wing, rebuilt the walls we'd broken down last night. Then I smelled coffee and heard movement in the sitting room. Dante stood by the windows, fully dressed in suit pants and a dress shirt, though his tie hung loose around his neck and his feet were bare. He held a cup of coffee and was staring out at the sound with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're still here," I said softly, pulling on a robe. He turned, and something in his expression made my heart clench. "I am. Though I have about 30 meetings starting in an hour that I can't avoid." "I understand." I moved to the small kitchenette where he'd apparently brewed coffee. "You made coffee." Eleanor brought it up, along with some rather pointed comments about how she needed to know where you both were for scheduling purposes. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I believe she's known for weeks that our living arrangements were more performance than reality. She's observant. She's loyal." He set down his cup, moving to stand in front of me. "Olivia, about last night." "Don't." I held up a hand. "If you're about to say it was a mistake or we need to go back to how things were, I was going to say that I don't regret it." His hands found my waist, pulling me close. "But I also don't know how to move forward. I don't know how to be what you need while also protecting you from my world." "Then we'll figure it out together." "Isn't that what I said? You make it sound simple." "It's not simple. It's terrifying and complicated and possibly a terrible idea." I looked up at him. "But I'd rather try and fail than never try at all." He kissed me then, slow and deep, and I felt him relaxing into it, letting go of some of the tension he carried like armor. "I need to go," he murmured against my lips. "But I'll be home for dinner. We'll talk then." "Okay." He pulled away reluctantly, finishing the knot on his tie with practiced efficiency. The door he paused. "Olivia, thank you for not giving up on me. I'm not planning to start now." After he left, I stood alone in my suite, trying to process everything that had changed in one night. We'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross, acknowledged feelings we'd both been trying to deny. Whatever happened next, whatever complications arose from mixing real emotion with our contractual marriage, we were in it together now. For better or worse. The day passed in a blur of museum work and distracted thoughts. I couldn't focus on the Renaissance exhibition, couldn't stop replaying last night. The way Dante had touched me, looked at me, let his walls come down. The way he'd stayed. "Earth to Olivia," James said, waving a hand in front of my face. "You've been staring at that painting for 20 minutes. Either you've discovered something revolutionary or you're having an existential crisis. Maybe both." I turned away from the Botticelli I'd been supposedly examining. "Sorry. Distracted today." "I can see that." He studied me with knowing eyes. "Though you look happier than you have all week. So whatever happened to fix things, I'm glad." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Blackwell. We need to meet. It concerns your husband and information you deserve to know. Come alone. Riverside Cafe, 6 p.m. A concerned friend. As flooded my veins. Every instinct screamed trap, manipulation, danger. But the message played on my curiosity, my desire to understand Dante's world better. I should tell him. Should forward the message and let him handle it. Instead, I found myself texting back. "How do I know you're legitimate?" The response came immediately. "You don't. But if you want to understand what you've married into, what your husband has really done to protect you, you'll come. Alone. Live." James was watching me with concern. "You okay? You just went completely white." "I'm fine." I shoved my phone in my pocket. "Just remembered something I need to take care of." The rest of the afternoon crawled by. By 5:30, I'd convinced myself that going was stupid, dangerous, exactly the kind of reckless decision Dante would lecture me about. By 5:45, I'd talked myself back into it. I needed to know what I was dealing with, what threats existed beyond Dante's careful explanations. I texted Eleanor, working late at the museum. Won't be home for dinner. Sorry. Then I texted Dante, something came up at work. Going to be late. Don't wait for me. Both lies. Both necessary. The Riverside Cafe was a small, nondescript place near the waterfront, public enough to feel safe, but not so busy that we'd be overheard. I arrived 5 minutes early and chose a table near the back, my heart pounding. At exactly 6 o'clock, a woman slid into the seat across from me. She was in her 40s, elegant in an understated way, with sharp eyes that assessed me with clinical precision. Mrs. Blackwell. Thank you for coming. Who are you? Someone who knew your husband well, before he became the man he is now. She ordered coffee from the hovering waitress, then turned her attention back to me. My name is Victoria Hayes. I was engaged to Dante's business partner 7 years ago. Business partner. Before he went legitimate. Or pretended to, at least. Her smile was bitter. Has he told you about the money laundering operation he ran? The weapons deals? The connections to organizations that would make your skin crawl? He told me his business operates in gray areas. Gray areas? She laughed, the sound sharp. Is that what he calls it? Mrs. Blackwell, your husband isn't just morally ambiguous. He's dangerous. The man I knew 7 years ago wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatened his interests. And now you've become one of those interests. I don't understand. Why are you telling me this? Because I know what it's like to love a man like Dante. To think you can save him, change him, make him better. Her eyes held genuine sympathy now. My fiancé died because of Dante. He was investigating transactions, found evidence of illegal activities, threatened to go to the authorities. 2 weeks later he was dead. Officially an accident, but I know better. My mouth went dry. You're saying Dante killed him? I'm saying that people who threaten Dante Blackwell don't tend to live very long. She leaned forward. Including the men your father borrowed money from. Has Dante told you what really happened to them? How your father's debts were erased? They agreed to terms. They were found dead, Mrs. Blackwell. All 3 of them. Within a week of your marriage. Dante didn't negotiate. He eliminated the problem. The world tilted. You're lying. Am I? She pulled out her phone, showing me newspaper articles about men found dead under mysterious circumstances. All within days of my wedding. I don't expect you to believe me. I expect you to ask questions. To demand the truth from your husband about what he's really capable of. Why? What do you gain from this? Justice. Closure. The satisfaction of knowing that at least one woman won't be blindsided by who Dante Blackwell really is. She stood. Ask him, Mrs. Blackwell. Ask him about the bodies. About what he did to ensure your father's safety. Then decide if the man you're falling for is worth the blood on his hands. She left before I could respond, disappearing into the early evening crowd. I sat alone with my racing thoughts and my phone full of articles about dead men. Men whose deaths had secured my father's safety. Men who had died because of me. Chapter 5: The Truth in Shadows. I sat in the cafe long after Victoria Hayes left, staring at the articles on my phone until the words blurred together. 3 men, all found dead within 10 days of my wedding. 1 in a supposed mugging gone wrong. 1 in a car accident. 1 from an apparent overdose, despite having no history of drug use. All 3 had been creditors threatening my father. All 3 were now dead. The waitress refilled my coffee for the 3rd time. Her concerned glances suggesting I looked as shattered as I felt. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the articles again, searching for some detail that would prove Victoria wrong, that would offer an innocent explanation. There wasn't one. Has Dante told you what really happened to them? How your father's debts were erased. He hadn't. He'd been vague about the arrangements, dismissive when I'd asked for details. I'd assumed he'd paid them off, negotiated settlements, used his wealth and influence to make the problems disappear. Not murder. My phone buzzed with a text from Dante. Where are you? Eleanor said you're working late, but the museum closed an hour ago. I'm worried. The casual concern in his message felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Was this the same man who had held me last night, who had whispered my name like a prayer, who had finally let me see past his walls? Or was it the man Victoria described? Ruthless, dangerous, capable of eliminating anyone who threatened his interests. Including you, a voice whispered in my mind. You're one of those interests now. I needed to go home. Needed to confront him, demand the truth, understand what I'd really married into. But I couldn't make my body move, couldn't shake the images of those 3 dead men from my mind. Another text. Olivia, you're scaring me. Please respond. Scaring him. The irony was bitter. He was worried about my safety while I was learning that he might be exactly the kind of danger I should be afraid of. I'm fine, I typed back. Just needed some air. Be home soon. The lie came easily now. Too easily. The drive back to the estate took forever and no time at all. Marcus met me at the entrance. His expression professionally neutral, but I wondered what he knew. What he'd done on Dante's orders. How many of those protective measures involved violence I'd been too naive to imagine. Mrs. Blackwell, he said, opening my door. Mr. Blackwell is in his study. He asked that you join him when you arrived. Of course he did. Dante always knew when something was wrong, always sensed disruptions in his carefully ordered world. I found him pacing by the windows, still in his work clothes but with his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. He turned when I entered, relief flashing across his features before being replaced by concern. Where were you? He crossed to me in 3 strides, his hands cupping my face. You said the museum, but when I called they said you'd left hours ago. I've been worried sick. The tenderness in his touch, the genuine fear in his voice. It would have melted me yesterday. Today it felt like manipulation. I need to ask you something, I said, stepping back from his touch. And I need you to tell me the truth. His expression shuddered slightly. What's wrong? The men my father owed money to. You said you'd settled his debts. What does that mean exactly? I paid them what was owed, plus interest. His voice was careful now, controlled. Why? All of them. Every single creditor. Yes, every one. His eyes narrowed. Olivia, what is this about? I pulled out my phone, showing him the articles I'd bookmarked. These men. They're all dead. All within days of our wedding. All under suspicious circumstances. Dante's face went absolutely still as he took my phone, scrolling through the articles with meticulous attention. When he looked up, his expression was unreadable. Where did you get these? That's your question. Not, I didn't kill them. Or, this is a terrible coincidence. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. That's what you're worried about. I'm worried about who's feeding you information designed to make you afraid of me. He set my phone down on his desk with careful precision. So I'll ask again, where did you get these articles? A woman named Victoria Hayes. She said she knew you years ago, that her fiancé died because he threatened to expose your illegal activities. I crossed my arms, trying to hold myself together. She said you eliminate anyone who threatens your interests. Is that true? Something dangerous flickered in Dante's eyes. Victoria Hayes. He said the name like a curse. Let me guess, she told you I'm a monster. That I had her fiancé killed. That these men died because I ordered it. Did you? The silence that followed felt endless. Dante moved to his bar cart, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey with steady hands. He held one out to me, and when I didn't take it, he downed both in quick succession. Sit down, he said finally. If we're having this conversation, you should sit down. I don't want to sit down. I want you to answer the question. I didn't kill them. He met my eyes directly. But I'm not entirely innocent either. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means that when I settled your father's debts, I made it very clear what would happen if they ever came near your family again. He refilled his glass. I have a reputation, Olivia. A reputation I've carefully cultivated over years of operating in spaces most people pretend don't exist. That reputation meant they believed me when I said there would be consequences for non-compliance. So you threatened them. I protected you. His voice hardened. There's a difference. Is there? If they're dead. I didn't kill them, he repeated, each word deliberate. But did I mourn their deaths? Did I investigate when I heard? Well, because they were dangerous men who made their living exploiting people like your father. The world is objectively better without them. You can't just decide who lives and dies. I didn't decide. But I also didn't intervene when other forces made that decision. He set down his glass. Welcome to my world, Olivia. This is what you married into. This is the gray area I warned you about. Gray area. I felt hysteria bubbling up. 3 men are dead. That's not gray, that's justice, he suggested coldly. Karma. The natural consequences of living a life built on violence and exploitation. Murder. The word hung between us. It's murder, Dante. And whether you pulled the trigger or not, you're complicit. Yes. The admission was stark, unadorned. I am complicit. I've always been complicit. This is who I am, what I do. I told you I operated in shadows, that there were aspects of my business that would make you uncomfortable. This is what I meant. I sank into the chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. And Victoria's fiancé. Did you have him killed too? Dante's expression turned grim. Richard Hayes was Victoria's fiancé and my business partner. We ran several ventures together, some legitimate, most not. He started skimming profits, keeping 2 sets of books, planning to disappear with several $1 million of my money. So you killed him? No. He sat in the chair across from me. I confronted him, ended our partnership, and told him he had 24 hours to return what he'd stolen or I'd pursue legal action. He chose to run anyway. His car went off a cliff 3 days later. Convenient. Suspicious, Dante corrected. I had my people investigate. Richard was being chased by several other people he'd stolen from. People with far fewer scruples than I have. One of them caught up to him. But you didn't try to save him. No. His eyes held mine. I didn't. He made his choices and they had consequences. I'm not a hero, Olivia. I never claimed to be. I wanted to believe him. Wanted desperately to find a version of this story where Dante was innocent, where Victoria was lying, where the man I'd fallen for wasn't capable of such cold calculation. But I couldn't. Why didn't you tell me? I asked quietly. Before the wedding, when we made our arrangement, why didn't you explain what settling my father's debts really meant? Because you wouldn't have agreed. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. You would have run, tried to find another way, put yourself and your father at greater risk. I did what needed to be done to protect you both. That wasn't your choice to make. It was the only choice. His voice turned intense. Those men weren't going to be satisfied with payment plans or negotiations. They wanted blood, Olivia. Yours, your father's, it didn't matter. The moment I paid them off and made it clear you were under my protection, you became a target. A way to get to me, to prove they weren't afraid of the great Dante Blackwell. So you what? Put out a hit on them. I let it be known that anyone who hurt you or your father would answer to me. That the protection I offered came with consequences for those who ignored it. His hands clenched. I didn't kill those men, but I created an environment where their deaths became inevitable. If that makes me guilty, then I'm guilty. I won't apologize for protecting you. Even if I didn't want that kind of protection. Even then. His eyes burned into mine. I told you I'm damaged. That I learned from Isabel's death that I can never let anyone I care about be vulnerable. You think I don't know how toxic that is? How controlling and morally questionable? He stood, starting to pace. But I can't change what I am. I can't unknow what I've learned. Love is a liability, and the only way to protect what I love is to make sure no one can use it against me. By becoming the monster they fear. If that's what it takes. He stopped in front of me. Yes, I will be the monster if it keeps you safe. I stared up at him, this man I'd married, this stranger wearing a familiar face. What about what I want? What if I don't want to be the reason you become something worse? Then you married the wrong man. His voice gentled slightly. I told you from the beginning this was who I am. You saw the walls, the control, the carefully maintained distance. You pushed past them anyway, demanded honesty, forced me to feel things I'd sworn I never would again. But changing how I feel about you doesn't change the methods I'll use to protect you. So what now? Tears burned behind my eyes. I just accept that people die because of me. That being married to you means living with blood on my hands. No. He crouched in front of my chair, his hands covering mine. You make a choice. You decide if I'm someone you can live with, knowing what you know now. If the answer is no, I'll honor our contract. You'll be free to go, your father's debts permanently erased, with enough money to start over anywhere you want. And if I stay, then you accept me as I am, damaged, morally compromised, sometimes terrifying. His grip tightened, but also devoted to you in a way that should probably frighten us both. I will protect you with everything I have, Olivia. I will lie, cheat, and yes, kill if necessary to ensure your safety. I won't pretend otherwise. I looked down at our joined hands, at the emerald ring that marked me as his. 24 hours ago, I'd been falling in love with him. Now I was confronting the reality of what that meant. I need time, I whispered. To think. To process. He nodded, standing and stepping back. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. The door, he paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not for protecting you. I'll never apologize for that. But for not being honest about what that protection would entail. After he left, I sat alone in his study, surrounded by expensive art and leather-bound books and the trappings of wealth built on shadows. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Haven't heard from you in days. Getting worried. Coffee tomorrow. Type back, yes. Desperately need to talk. Her response was immediate. That bad? Want me to bring tequila and a getaway car? Maybe both. I wandered through the house, eventually finding myself in the library where Dante had massaged my feet, where we'd had our first real conversation about the walls between us. It felt like a lifetime ago, though it had been less than 2 weeks. Eleanor found me there an hour later, curled up in one of the leather chairs with a book I wasn't reading. Mr. Blackwell asked me to check on you, she said gently. Can I bring you anything? The truth about who I married. The words came out more bitter than I intended. Eleanor settled into the chair across from me, a liberty she rarely took. You married a complicated man with a complicated past who does questionable things for what he believes are the right reasons. That's a very diplomatic way of saying he's a criminal. Is he? She tilted her head. Or is he someone who operates outside traditional morality to protect what matters to him? I've worked for Mr. Blackwell for 5 years, Miss Olivia. I've seen him do things that kept me awake at night. I've also seen him save lives, protect people who had no one else, and show kindness where others would show cruelty. That doesn't excuse. It doesn't excuse anything, she agreed. But it does complicate the narrative. Mr. Blackwell isn't a hero. But he's not a monster either. He's something in between, and if you're going to stay with him, you need to make peace with that gray space. How do you make peace with it? Knowing what he's capable of. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. My daughter was being abused by her husband. The police couldn't help. He had connections, money, lawyers who tied everything up in red tape. I mentioned it to Mr. Blackwell once, casually, not expecting anything. 2 weeks later, my daughter's husband disappeared. Moved to another country, I was told. Papers filed for divorce. Settlement extremely generous to her. She met my eyes directly. I don't know what Mr. Blackwell did. I don't want to know. But my daughter is safe now, and her ex-husband will never hurt anyone again. So yes, I make peace with a gray space. Because sometimes the world needs people willing to operate in shadows to protect those in the light. After she left, I thought about her words. About moral complexity and the difference between justice and vengeance. About whether protecting someone justified any method, any cost. About whether I could love a man who would kill for me without hesitation. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat on my private terrace, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sun rise over the Sound. Dante was right, I had a choice to make. Stay and accept him as he was, shadows and all. Or leave and spend the rest of my life wondering if love was worth the cost of moral compromise. At 7 a.m. there was a soft knock on my door. I opened it to find Dante, still in the same clothes from last night, looking as exhausted as I felt. I couldn't sleep, he said simply. Kept thinking about you alone up here, processing everything. Wondering if I'd lost you. Have you? Yes. Lost me? I don't know. Have I? I stepped aside, letting him enter. We moved to the terrace together, standing at the railing and watching the morning light paint the water gold. I met with Maya this morning, I said finally. Told her everything. She said I was insane for even considering staying. Dante's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. She's probably right. The smart thing, the safe thing would be to walk away. To take your generous settlement and start over somewhere far from your world. I turned to face him. But I'm not sure I can do that. Hope flickered in his eyes. Why not? Because despite everything, the lies of omission, the moral ambiguity, the blood on your hands, I understand why you did it. I don't agree with your methods. I'm not sure I ever will. But I understand the desperation to protect someone you love, the fear that drives you to extremes. Olivia, I'm not finished. I held up a hand. If I stay, things need to change. No more decisions made without consulting me. No more protection that involves death unless absolutely necessary. And you need to work on being less you. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Less me. Less controlling. Less convinced that you alone can keep the world at bay. I reached for his hand. If we're going to make this work, it has to be a partnership. Real partnership. Not you making all the decisions and expecting me to comply. I can try. His fingers laced with mine. Though I should warn you, decades of control issues won't disappear overnight. I'm not expecting perfection. Just effort. I looked up at him. And honesty. Complete honesty from here on out. If there are more bodies, more shadows in your past, I need to know now. He was quiet for a long moment, and I saw him wrestling with how much to reveal. Finally. There are more bodies. More shadows than I can count. My transition to legitimate business is real, but it's slow, and there are still connections, still operations that exist in spaces you'd rather not think about. Tell me. I braced myself. All of it. We spent the next hour on that terrace, Dante laying out his empire in brutal detail. The money laundering operations he'd run in his 20s. The protection rackets, the legitimate businesses used as fronts, the carefully maintained relationships with people who operated entirely outside the law. He explained the transition he'd been orchestrating, the gradual shift toward legal enterprises, the deals he'd made to extract himself from the worst of it. It's like untangling a knot, he said. Pull the wrong string and everything falls apart. So it has to be done carefully, methodically, over years. Another 2 years, maybe 3, and I'll be clean. Completely legitimate. And until then, I maintain enough connection to the old world to keep myself and those I care about safe while building the foundation for the new one. He squeezed my hand. That's the truth, Olivia. Ugly and complicated and morally questionable. If you can't accept it, I'll understand. I thought about Eleanor's daughter, safe because Dante had intervened. About my father, protected from men who would have destroyed him. About all the shadows that existed in the world, and the people willing to navigate them so others didn't have to. I can accept it, I said finally. On one condition. Name it. You let me help. Not with the illegal things but with the transition. With building the legitimate side of your empire. I have a brain and education that you're not using. Let me be your partner in the light, even if I can't be in the shadows. Surprise crossed his features. You want to work with me. I want to be part of your life, all of it. The good, the bad, and the morally ambiguous. I managed a small smile. Plus, I'm guessing your business could use some cultural legitimacy. Museum boards, charity foundations, arts patronage. That's my world. Let me help you build yours. For the first time since Victoria's revelations, genuine warmth filled his eyes. You're remarkable. You know that. I'm practical. There's a difference. I leaned against him, letting him pull me close. And Dante. If anyone else dies because of me, because of our marriage, I need to know about it. Immediately. No more finding out through mysterious women in cafes. Agreed. He pressed a kiss to the top of my head. Though for the record, Victoria Hayes has her own agenda. Richard wasn't the saint she paints him as. Tell me. So he did, revealing a more complex picture than Victoria had presented. Richard had been violent, controlling, involved in ventures that made Dante's operations look tame by comparison. His death had likely been orchestrated by people he'd double-crossed long before Dante ended their partnership. She blames me because it's easier than accepting who Richard really was, Dante said. And because she's not entirely wrong. If I'd handled the situation differently, maybe he'd still be alive. Or maybe he'd have killed more people, I pointed out. You can't carry the weight of every death in your orbit, Dante. You'll drown under it. I'm already drowning. His arms tightened around me. Have been since Isabel. You're the first thing that's made me want to swim toward the surface. We stood like that as the sun climbed higher, two imperfect people trying to find a way forward through complicated truths and uncomfortable realities. It wasn't the fairy tale I'd imagined as a little girl, but maybe it was something better, something real. So we're doing this? Dante asked. Really trying. We're doing this. I turned in his arms to face him. But Dante. No more secrets. No more protection that looks like control. We're partners now, in everything. Partners, he agreed, sealing it with a kiss that tasted like coffee and promises. In everything. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't simple. But as the morning light washed over us, I felt something like hope. Maybe love didn't have to be pure to be real. Maybe accepting someone's darkness was just another way of loving their light. And maybe, just maybe, we could build something beautiful out of all these complicated shadows. Chapter 6, Light and Shadow. The weeks that followed our terrace conversation established a new rhythm. Dante kept his promise about honesty, sometimes to an uncomfortable degree. He included me in business discussions that made my stomach churn, explaining the intricacies of extricating himself from partnerships that straddled legal boundaries. I learned more about his world than I'd ever wanted to know, but I also understood him better for it. In return, I brought him into my world. He attended museum fundraisers where his presence and generous donations opened doors. We partnered with Mrs. Lee's foundation to create an arts education program for underprivileged children. I introduced him to the legitimate side of wealth and influence, showing him that power didn't always have to live in shadows. You're good at this, he said one evening after a particularly successful charity gala. We were in the car heading home. His tie loosened, my heels kicked off. Navigating these circles, making connections. I thought I was comfortable in high society, but you make it look effortless. It's not that different from what you do, I pointed out. Reading people, understanding what they want, presenting yourself in the way that achieves your goals. You just do it in boardrooms and I do it in ballrooms. The stakes are considerably lower at your events. Are they? I turned to face him. These are the people who fund museums, who sit on boards, who decide what art gets preserved and what gets forgotten. You think that's not a form of power? A slow smile spread across his face. I'm starting to see why you married me. We're more alike than I realized. Scary thought, isn't it? Terrifying. But he laced his fingers through mine, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. A gesture that had become familiar, comforting. Though I find I don't mind being terrified by you. We'd settled into a shared routine that felt almost normal. Breakfast together most mornings. Dinner every evening we weren't attending some function. Dante had moved into my suite, or I into his, depending on how you looked at it. And waking up beside him had become my favorite part of the day. The man who was so controlled in public was soft and vulnerable in private. His guard finally lowered. But the shadows remained. They always did. 2 months after Victoria's revelation, Dante came home early from the office. His expression tight in a way that made my stomach drop. "What's wrong?" I asked, setting aside the museum catalog I'd been reviewing. "We need to talk." He moved to the bar cart, pouring himself a drink he didn't sip. "There's been a development. One you need to know about." I braced myself. "Tell me. Do you remember me mentioning Paolo Valentini? The man I had arrested for human trafficking?" "Vaguely. You said he was in prison in Madrid." "Was?" Dante's jaw tightened. "He was released 3 weeks ago. And according to my sources, he's back in the city." As flooded my veins. Why wasn't I told about this earlier? Because I was handling it. Or thought I was. He finally took a sip of his drink. "Paolo has a reputation for going after people's families, their loved ones. It's his signature. Make them watch, make them suffer before he moves on them directly. And you think he'll come after me?" "I know he will." Dante set down his glass with controlled precision. "He blames me for 4 years of his life. He'll want payback, and you're the most obvious target. So what do we do?" "I'm increasing security. Marco will be with you at all times when I'm not. The museum is being advised that you'll have a security detail on premises. And I need you to be more careful about your movements, about where you go and who you see." There it was, the control reasserting itself, the walls going back up. I recognized the pattern now, the way fear drove him to tighten his grip on everything around him. "Dante," I said carefully, "I understand you're worried. But I'm not going to live in a cage because of some criminal with a grudge. This isn't about control, it's about keeping you alive. It's always about keeping someone alive with you. At what point does protection become prison?" I moved to stand in front of him. "We agreed, partners. That means you don't make unilateral decisions about my safety. We discuss options and decide together." Anger flashed in his eyes. "There are no options to discuss. Paolo Valentini is dangerous, unpredictable, and utterly without conscience. This isn't negotiable." "Everything is negotiable." I kept my voice steady despite my racing heart. "What are the actual threats? Give me facts, not fear." He stared at me for a long moment, clearly warring between his instinct to command and his promise to consult. Finally, he pulled out his phone, showing me a series of photographs and documents. "Paolo arrived in the city 3 weeks ago. He's been meeting with various members of my former business associates. People who resent my transition to legitimacy, who feel betrayed by my cooperation with authorities on certain matters." Dante scrolled through images of men I didn't recognize. 2 days ago, one of my informants reported that Paolo asked specific questions about you. Your schedule, your routines, where you go without security. "That's definitely concerning," I admitted. "But increased security is reasonable. Locking me down entirely isn't." "Olivia, let me finish." I took his phone, studying the images more carefully. "You've spent years operating in this world. You know how men like Paolo think. What would actually keep me safer? Hiding me away like a target, or making sure everyone knows that touching me means dealing with you? Surprise flickered across his features. You're suggesting we make a statement. I'm suggesting we don't let him dictate how we live. You told me once that reputation is a weapon. Use it. I handed back his phone. Let Paolo and everyone else know that I'm not some helpless target. That I'm your wife and partner. And anyone who threatens me is threatening you directly. That could make you an even bigger target. Or it could make me too expensive a target. If they think hurting me will bring down your full wrath, most people will hesitate. The ones who don't, that's what security is for. Dante was quiet for so long I thought I'd overstepped. Then, slowly, a smile curved his lips. You're starting to think like me. I'm not sure if I should be proud or concerned. Both, probably. I moved closer, my hands sliding up his chest. But you married me for my intelligence, remember? Trust it now. His arms came around me, pulling me tight against him. I do trust you. It's the rest of the world I don't trust. He pressed his forehead to mine. The thought of anything happening to you, of failing to protect you the way I failed Isabel. I'm not Isabel, I said gently. And you didn't fail her. You loved her, and terrible people did a terrible thing. But you can't prevent every tragedy by controlling every variable. Sometimes you just have to have faith that we're stronger together than any threat we might face apart. Faith. He said the word like it was foreign. I'm not very good at faith. Then it's lucky you're good at other things. I pulled his head down for a kiss that started tender and quickly turned heated. Like making me feel safe even when I'm choosing danger. Like trusting me to be part of your world instead of just something you protect from it. You make it sound simple, he murmured against my lips. It's not simple. But it's possible. I kissed him again. Now tell me the rest of your plan. The parts you were going to implement without telling me. A rueful smile touched his mouth. You know me too well. That's the point of marriage, isn't it? The plan Dante had developed was actually solid. Increased security but not suffocating. Public appearances at high-profile events where attacking me would be foolish. Private investigators tracking Paolo's movements. And a meeting. Dante would arrange to see Paolo directly, make clear the boundaries and consequences. That's the part one don't like, I said when he explained this last piece. Meeting with him alone puts you at risk. It's necessary. Paolo needs to understand that going after you isn't viable. The only way to make that clear is face to face. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Not negotiable, I countered, using his own words against him. If we're making a statement about me being your partner, your equal, then I need to be present. Otherwise, it's just you protecting another possession. Olivia, this isn't a game. Paolo is genuinely dangerous. I know. Which is why we'll meet him somewhere public, surrounded by your security. But I need to look him in the eye, to show him I'm not afraid. That I'm choosing this life with full awareness of its risks. I held his gaze. You said you wanted a partner, not someone to shelter. Prove it. He looked like he wanted to argue, to refuse, to do anything but agree. I could see the war happening behind his eyes. The instinct to protect warring with his promise to respect my autonomy. If I agree, he said finally, you follow my lead. If I say we leave immediately. No arguments, no hesitation. Can you do that? Yes. And you let Marco give you some basic self-defense training. If something goes wrong, I need to know you can protect yourself long enough for help to arrive. Agreed. I squeezed his hands. Thank you. For trusting me with this. For trusting you. He pulled me close. Olivia, I trust you with everything. It's the universe I don't trust. The chaos, the variables I can't control. But you're right. Hiding you away would be admitting defeat before the battle even begins. If we're going to do this, we do it together. Together, I agreed, sealing it with a kiss. The next 3 weeks were a crash course in Dante's world. Marco taught me defensive moves that felt absurd in my museum office but might save my life in a crisis. Dante walked me through various scenarios, explained the psychology of men like Paolo, taught me how to read threats and respond appropriately. The key is to never show fear, he said during one of our evening sessions. Men like Paolo feed on fear, use it to destabilize and control. If you can maintain composure, make him believe you're untouchable, he'll hesitate. And if he doesn't hesitate, then you do exactly what Marco taught you and trust that I'll handle the rest. We attended a flurry of high-profile events, gallery openings, charity auctions, society dinners. Each appearance was calculated, designed to show that we were united, strong, undeterred by any threats. The society pages ate it up, publishing photos of us looking glamorous and in love, which wasn't entirely an act anymore. Mrs. Blackwell, Mrs. Lee said at one such event, pulling me aside with a conspiratorial smile. You're positively glowing. Marriage agrees with you. It has its moments, I said, watching Dante across the room charming potential investors for our arts education program. He looked devastating in a tuxedo, every inch the powerful businessman, but I knew the man underneath now. The one who brought me coffee in bed and argued with me about Renaissance symbolism and sometimes woke up from nightmares about women dying. He's different with you, Mrs. Lee observed. More human, less intimidating. I don't know about less intimidating. I smiled as Dante caught my eye across the room, his expression softening. But maybe more human. He's trying at least. That's all anyone can ask. She squeezed my hand. My husband and I have been married 37 years now. Want to know the secret? Please. Accept the whole person. The good, the bad, the occasionally infuriating. Love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing someone despite their flaws, or sometimes because of them. Her eyes twinkled. And it looks to me like you've made your choice. She was right. Somewhere in the past months, the arranged marriage had become something real. The man I'd married for practical reasons had become the man I loved, shadows and all. The realization should have terrified me. Instead, it felt inevitable. The meeting with Paolo was scheduled for a Thursday evening at a private club Dante frequented. Neutral territory, well-staffed, with multiple exits and security cameras. As public as possible while still maintaining some privacy. Remember, Dante said as we drove there, his hand tight on mine. You don't speak unless I indicate it's safe. You stay close to me at all times. And if anything feels wrong, we leave. I know. I squeezed back. Dante, I can do this. I know you can. That's what terrifies me. The club was elegant in an understated way. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, soft lighting. Marcus and two other members of Dante's security team flanked us as we entered, their presence both reassuring and ominous. Paolo Valentini waited in a private room, a glass of wine before him. His posture relaxed in a way that set my nerves on edge. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with Mediterranean features and cold eyes that assessed us with calculating precision. Dante, he said, not standing. And this must be the new wife. She's lovelier than the photos suggest. Paolo. Dante's voice was ice. I thought it was time we had a conversation. Did you? Paolo's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm surprised. Usually you just send lawyers or, if I'm lucky, men with guns. This personal touch is unexpected. Consider it a courtesy. One you should appreciate, given our history. History. Paolo laughed, the sound bitter. Is that what we're calling 4 years of my life? A footnote in your prestigious career. Dante sat, pulling me down beside him, his hand never leaving mine. You were trafficking children, Paolo. Did you expect me to look the other way? I expected my partner to stand with me, or at least give me warning before setting the authorities on me. Paolo's gaze shifted to me. But I suppose that's water under the bridge. You've moved on to new ventures. Legitimate businesses. Pretty wives. The American dream. This isn't about the past, Dante said. It's about the future. My sources tell me you've been asking questions about Olivia. I need you to understand that's a path you don't want to go down. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Dante leaned forward slightly. You and I have bad history. I accept responsibility for my part in that. But Olivia is innocent of any wrong between us. Touching her wouldn't hurt me. It would destroy you. Paolo studied us both, his expression unreadable. Then, to my surprise, he laughed. You actually care about her. I thought it was another business arrangement, but you actually care. Which should tell you how serious I am about protecting her. Or how vulnerable you've become. Paolo's eyes glittered. You learned nothing from Isabel, did you? Love is a weakness, Dante. It gives men like me leverage. I felt Dante tense beside me, his hand tightening almost painfully on mine. Before he could respond, I spoke. You're wrong, I said quietly. Paolo's attention snapped to me. Am I? Love isn't a weakness. It's a choice. A calculated risk, maybe, but not a weakness. I held his gaze despite my racing heart. You threaten me, you prove you have no real power. That the only way you can hurt Dante is through something he cares about, which means you can't touch him directly. Olivia. Dante's voice held warning. No, she has a point, Paolo said, studying me with new interest. Smart girl. Brave too, speaking up when your husband clearly wants you quiet. I'm his partner, not his possession. Which means if you have grievances with Dante, you discuss them with both of us. I leaned forward slightly, channeling every ounce of courage I didn't quite feel. But I should warn you, I'm not Isabel. I'm not an innocent bystander caught in crossfire. I know exactly who I married, what world I've entered. And I chose it anyway. Because some things are worth the risk. Some people are worth fighting for. I glanced at Dante, seeing the fear and pride warring in his expression. You can waste your time trying to hurt us, or you can accept that Dante's transition to legitimacy doesn't have to mean your destruction. There are other ways forward if you're smart enough to see them. Are you offering me something, Mrs. Blackwell? I looked at Dante, raising an eyebrow. We hadn't discussed this, but I could see the possibility, the opening for something other than endless warfare. We might be, Dante said slowly, understanding where I was going. If you're willing to discuss it rationally. What kind of offer? The kind where everyone walks away alive and successful. Dante's voice remained steady. You have skills, connections, knowledge of operations I need to dismantle carefully. You could be an asset in that dismantling, or you could be an obstacle. One option is profitable for you. The other is fatal. Paolo was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving between us. Finally, he laughed again, but this time with something like genuine amusement. You're actually serious. You want to buy my cooperation. I want to offer you a choice, Dante corrected. Continue nursing your grievance and risk everything, or work with me to transition out of the business cleanly, profitably, safely. And why would I trust you after what you did? Because I'm offering you what I wish someone had offered me. A way out with your dignity and bank account intact. Dante's voice softened slightly. I didn't turn you in out of malice, Paolo. I did it because what you were doing was unconscionable. But I understand now that destroying you wasn't necessary. Redirecting you might have been the better path. Paolo studied us both for what felt like an eternity. Finally he stood, buttoning his jacket. I'll think about it. Your offer is unexpected. His eyes lingered on me. You've changed him, Mrs. Blackwell. The Dante I knew would have had me killed rather than offered partnership. Maybe, I said. Or maybe he's becoming who he always wanted to be. Sometimes it just takes the right person to make that possible. After Paolo left, Dante and I sat in silence for several minutes. Marcus appeared in the doorway, confirming that Paolo had departed without incident. That, Dante finally said, was possibly the most terrifying and impressive thing I've ever witnessed. I thought we were doing okay until I improvised the partnership offer. That was brilliant. He pulled me close. Risky but brilliant. Offering him something productive to do with his resentment rather than just threatening him. That's not a strategy one would have considered. Because you're used to thinking in terms of threats and control. And you're used to thinking in terms of collaboration and mutual benefit. He pressed a kiss to my temple. See, partners. You bring perspectives I don't have. Do you really think he'll take the offer? I don't know. But you gave us an option besides warfare. That's more than I had before tonight. He stood, pulling me up with him. Let's go home. I've had enough of shadows for one evening. Home, I agreed, liking the sound of it more each time I said it. We made love that night with an intensity that felt like reaffirmation. That we'd survived another brush with Dante's past. That we'd faced it together rather than him trying to shield me from it. That our partnership was real, tested, and stronger for having been challenged. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Dante spoke quietly. I love you. The words hung in the air between us, simple and profound. It was the first time he'd said them, the first time he'd allowed himself to acknowledge what had been growing between us. I know, I whispered back. I've known for a while. You have. The way you look at me when you think I'm not watching. The way you bring me coffee every morning because you know I'm useless before caffeine. The way you let me argue with you, challenge you, push you to be better. I traced the line of his jaw. You show me you love me every day, Dante. The words are just confirmation. I should have said them sooner. You said them when you were ready. That's what matters. I pressed a kiss to his chest, feeling his heart beating steady and strong beneath my lips. I love you too. In case that wasn't obvious. His arms tightened around me. Say it again. I love you, Dante Blackwell. Your light and your shadows. Your strength and your fears. All of it. Even the parts that should probably terrify you. Especially those parts. 'Cause they're what made you who you are. And who you are is someone worth loving. We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. The shadows finally feeling less like threats and more like the natural darkness that makes the light mean something. Outside, the city glittered with possibility. And for the first time since this arrangement began, I believed we might actually build something beautiful from the complicated mess of our beginning. Together. Chapter 7, The Price of Love. 3 months into our real marriage, as opposed to the contractual arrangement we'd started with, I received an envelope at the museum. No return address. Hand-delivered to the front desk with instructions that it was urgent and personal. Inside was a single photograph and a note. The photograph showed my father leaving his apartment, unaware he was being watched. The angle suggested it had been taken from a car, the kind of surveillance shot that made my blood run cold. The note was brief. We have unfinished business. The debt isn't settled. You have 48 hours to deliver $2 million, or your father pays the price. Come alone or he dies. Instructions to follow. My hands shook as I read it again, trying to make sense of words that didn't align with reality. Dante had paid off all my father's debts. We'd watched 3 men die because of those arrangements. This couldn't be happening, unless Dante had lied. The thought surfaced unbidden, unwelcome. He'd promised honesty, complete transparency. But what if there were debts he hadn't mentioned? What if his protection hadn't been as comprehensive as he'd claimed? I pulled out my phone to call him, then stopped. The note said, "Come alone." That whoever was behind this was watching, waiting for me to run to my husband for help. They didn't understand that Dante and I were partners now. That I didn't make decisions about threats without him, just as he didn't make them without me. I forwarded a photo of both the picture and note to Dante with a single text. Museum. Emergency. His response came within seconds. On my way. He arrived 20 minutes later, Marcus and 2 other security personnel in tow. James tried to stop them at my office door, but one look at Dante's face had him stepping aside quickly. Show me, Dante said without preamble. I handed him the envelope. Watched his expression shift from concern to cold fury as he examined the contents. This is impossible, he said finally. I paid everyone. Verified every debt. There's no one left with legitimate claim to money from your father. Then who sent this? Someone who knows about the original debts and is trying to exploit them. He pulled out his phone, firing off rapid texts. Marcus, I need you to get to Richard Hartley now. Full security detail. No one approaches him without clearance. Dante, what's happening? He handed the envelope to Marcus, who photographed it with practiced efficiency. This is a setup. Either someone trying to extort money using old information or... He stopped, his jaw tightening. Or what? Or Paolo making a move I didn't anticipate. He took my hand. We're going home. I need to make some calls. The note said come alone. The note is designed to isolate you. To make you vulnerable. His eyes burned into mine. We don't negotiate with people who threaten family. We identify them and eliminate the threat. The casual mention of elimination should have bothered me more than it did. Instead, I felt a grim satisfaction that Dante wasn't going to let this slide. We were in the car within minutes, Marcus driving with a kind of focused intensity that suggested he'd done this before. Dante spent the entire ride on the phone, speaking in rapid Italian to various contacts, his expression growing darker with each conversation. What did you learn? I asked when he finally ended the last call. Paolo met with someone yesterday. My source couldn't identify who, but the timing is suspicious. He squeezed my hand. This is exactly the kind of game he plays. Use old wounds, create fear, destabilize before making a real move. So the threat might not even be real. Oh, the threat is real. But the target might not be your father. His eyes held mine. It might be you. Get you to drop your security. Go somewhere alone to deliver money that will never satisfy them, and then they take me. Or worse. His hand tightened almost painfully on mine. Which is why you're not leaving the estate until we resolve this. No arguments. For once, I didn't have any. The photograph of my father, the calculated cruelty of threatening him to get to me. It was exactly the kind of psychological warfare Dante had warned me about. What about my father? Is he safe? Marcus has a team with him. He's being moved to a secure location as we speak. Dante's phone buzzed with an incoming text. He read it, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Your father is secure. He's asking about you. Can I talk to him? Dante handed me his phone. My father's voice when I called was shaky but trying to be strong. Livy, what's going on? These men showed up and said there was a threat. It's okay, Dad. Just a precaution. I tried to keep my voice steady. You're safe. Dante's handling everything. This is because of me, isn't it? Because of my debts. The guilt in his voice broke my heart. I never wanted you to have to deal with this kind of danger. You didn't create this situation, Dad. Some very bad people are trying to use old information to hurt us. But they won't succeed. I glanced at Dante, who nodded encouragement. Dante won't let anything happen to either of us. He loves you, doesn't he? Your husband. The question surprised me. Yes, he does. Then I'm glad. Glad you found someone who'll protect you better than I could. His voice cracked. I'm sorry, Livy. For all of this. Don't be. Just stay safe and let Dante's people do their job. I blinked back tears. I love you, Dad. After we hung up, I sat in silence, trying to process everything. The threat, the fear, the cold calculation of people who would hurt an innocent man to get leverage. He'll be safe, Dante said quietly. I have my best people with him. No one will get close. I know. I turned to him. What's the plan? We make them think you're complying. Follow their instructions when they come, but with full surveillance and backup. Lead them to believe they have the upper hand, then close the trap. Using me as bait. Using us as bait, he corrected. You think I'm letting you do this alone? The note said. I don't care what the note said. We're partners, remember? Where you go, I go. His expression turned fierce. Besides, they're expecting a frightened woman trying to save her father. They're not expecting us. The second set of instructions arrived via text that evening. Tomorrow night. Pier 47. Midnight. Come alone with the money. Any sign of security and your father dies. Pier 47 was in the warehouse district, isolated, the kind of place where terrible things happen without witnesses. Exactly where you'd expect a trap to be set. It's too obvious, I said, studying the message. They have to know we'll suspect an ambush. Which means either they're counting on desperation to override caution or, Dante frowned. Or it's a distraction, I finished. Get us focused on the pier while they move on the real target. Your father. His expression turned grim. We need to double the security on him. Make sure he's somewhere truly secure, not just the location Marcus moved him to. He made more calls while I paced the living room, trying to think like someone who wanted to hurt us. What would I do if I were Paolo? How would I exploit our obvious move to protect my father? Dante, I said slowly. What if the real target isn't my father at all? He looked up from his phone. What do you mean? Think about it. They know we'll secure my father. They know we'll see through the pier trap. So, what if the actual goal is something else entirely? I moved to the windows, looking out at the darkening sound. What if they want us distracted, focused on physical threats, while they do something else? Like what? I don't know. Financial. Legal. What would hurt you most that doesn't involve violence? Understanding dawned on Dante's face. The Singapore deal. It's in the final stages of approval. If something went wrong, if evidence of illegal activity surfaced, would it collapse? It would destroy months of work and cost me access to legitimate markets I've spent years cultivating. He was already pulling up documents on his phone. That would hurt me far more than any physical attack. We spent the next hour going through his business dealings, looking for vulnerabilities. It was well past midnight when we finally found it, a potential weak point in one of his recent transactions that could be exploited if someone had the right information. Paolo would have that information, Dante said grimly. From when we were partners. If he leaked it to the authorities or my business partners, everything you've built collapses. And I'm right back in the shadows, except this time with no legitimate options left. He set down his phone. That's what this is about. Not killing us, not even really threatening your father. It's about destroying the future I'm trying to build. So, what do? Dante's expression turned calculating. We give him what he wants. Or appear to. The plan we developed was risky, complex, and required perfect timing. I would appear to comply with the pier instructions, but with full surveillance and Dante's team positioned to intervene. Meanwhile, Dante would set up a meeting with Paolo under the guise of renegotiating their deal, offering him a bigger piece of the legitimate business in exchange for whatever information he'd threatened to leak. He'll see through it, I said as we finalized the details. Probably. But it will buy us time to secure the weak points in our legitimate operations. And if we're lucky, Dante paused. If we're lucky, he'll accept. Take the win and move on. You don't believe that? No. His expression was dark. Paolo is driven by vengeance more than profit. But we have to try. The alternative is warfare that puts everyone we care about at risk. The next evening arrived too quickly. I dressed in dark clothing, practical boots, my hair pulled back. Dante's team had wired me with a microphone and GPS tracker, invisible under my clothes. The money, actual cash that made my stomach turn, sat in a duffel bag that Marcus had prepared. Remember, Dante said as we prepared to leave. You don't engage beyond the initial contact. No heroics, no negotiations. Just follow the plan. I know. And Olivia. He cupped my face, his eyes intense. If anything feels wrong, if your instincts tell you to run, you run. I'll handle the fallout. We'll handle the fallout, I corrected. Together. He kissed me then, hard and desperate, as if trying to memorize the feel of me. When we broke apart, I saw fear in his eyes he couldn't quite hide. I can't lose you, he whispered. Not like I lost Isabel. I won't survive it again. You won't lose me. I pressed my forehead to his. I promise. It was a promise I had no business making, but in that moment, I needed him to believe it as much as I needed to believe it myself. Pier 47 was exactly as ominous as I'd imagined. Abandoned warehouses, broken streetlights, the kind of silence that felt aggressive. Marcus dropped me 3 blocks away as instructed, though I knew Dante's team was positioned throughout the area. My heart hammered as I walked toward the designated meeting spot, the duffel bag heavy in my hand. Every shadow looked like a threat, every sound like approaching danger. A figure stepped out of the darkness near the pier's entrance. Not Paolo, as I'd half expected, but a younger man I didn't recognize. He had dead eyes that assessed me with clinical precision. Mrs. Blackwell. The money. I held up the bag. Where's the proof my father is safe? You don't make demands here. But he pulled out his phone, showing me a live video feed of my father in what looked like a hotel room, very much alive and unharmed. Relief flooded through me. Fine. Take it. I tossed him the bag. He caught it with one hand, unzipping it to verify the contents. While he was distracted, I pressed the signal button hidden in my pocket, the one that would tell Dante's team I'd made visual confirmation of the money transfer. This is only half, the man said, his voice turning dangerous. Ice flooded my veins. The note said 2 million. That's 2 million. The note was outdated. The price went up. He stepped closer, and I saw the gun tucked into his waistband. 4 million now. You have 24 hours to get the rest. That's not possible. Then your father dies. And maybe we'll visit that museum where you work. See how many innocent people have to suffer before you take this seriously. The threat to others, to people who had nothing to do with this situation, made my blood boil. You're making a mistake. My husband. Your husband is currently meeting with Paolo Valentini across town. Very convenient timing, wouldn't you say? His smile was cruel. He can't save you right now, Mrs. Blackwell. You're on your own. Before I could respond, before I could press the panic button that would bring Dante's team running, I heard a voice I'd hoped never to hear again. Actually, Victoria Hayes said, stepping out of the shadows, she's not alone at all. She had a gun pointed at the man, her expression cold and professional. Drop the money and leave. Or I'll drop you. The man hesitated, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he dropped the duffel bag and ran, disappearing into the warehouse district. Victoria lowered her gun, turning to me. We need to talk. But not here. My car is 2 blocks north. I'm not going anywhere with you. I pressed the panic button, knowing Dante's team would be here in minutes. You set this up. You're working with Paolo. I'm working against Paolo, she corrected. But I needed you to understand what you're really dealing with. What your husband's world really means. She glanced over her shoulder. Security will be here soon. Come with me now if you want the truth. Or stay and let Dante wrap you in protection while Paolo destroys everything. Against every instinct screaming at me to wait for backup, I followed her. Because she was right, I needed to understand the full picture, not just the version Dante wanted me to see. And because something in Victoria's expression suggested she was as much a victim of this world as I was. Victoria's car was parked in an alley, nondescript and running. She drove in silence for several blocks before speaking. Paolo didn't hire those men. I did. The admission should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a strange calm. Why? Because you need to understand what Dante is willing to sacrifice to protect you. What he's already sacrificed. She turned down a side street, checking her mirrors constantly. 3 months ago, Dante made a deal with Paolo. Full partnership in the legitimate businesses, generous settlement for past grievances, everything you offered at that club meeting. He told me Paolo was considering the offer. He lied. Victoria's voice was flat. Paolo accepted immediately. The deal was done. But there was a condition. My stomach sank. What condition? That Dante distance himself from you. Not divorce, nothing so obvious. But that he gradually pull back, create emotional distance, make it clear to the world that you weren't as important to him as everyone thought. She glanced at me. He refused. Told Paolo the deal was off if that was the price. Why would Paolo even want that? Because he knows that Dante's love for you is his greatest vulnerability. As long as you matter, as long as you're visibly important to him, you're a target. Paolo's way of making peace included removing that vulnerability. Victoria turned another corner. Dante chose you over the deal. Over the legitimate future he's been building. He walked away from everything rather than pretend you didn't matter. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand the choice he made. And the choice you'll have to make. She pulled over in a parking garage, turning to face me. I blamed Dante for Richard's death for years. But the truth is, Richard chose greed over safety. He could have walked away, taken the loss, started over. He chose to steal and run instead. What changed your mind? Research. Investigation. Accepting that the man I loved was deeply flawed and that his death, while tragic, was ultimately the consequence of his own choices. Her eyes held genuine sympathy. Dante told you I wanted revenge. He's not entirely wrong. But what I really wanted was for you to understand that loving someone like Dante means accepting impossible choices. He will always choose you over his own interests. The question is whether you can live with what that costs. My phone started ringing. Dante, undoubtedly frantic. I need to take this. Victoria nodded. Tell him you're safe. But ask him about Paolo's deal. Ask him what he gave up for you. I answered the phone to Dante's voice, tight with barely controlled panic. Olivia, where are you? Marcus said you didn't wait for pickup. I'm safe. I'm with Victoria Hayes. What? Olivia, she's dangerous. She saved me from Paolo's men. And she told me about the deal. The one you refused because it meant distancing yourself from me. Silence on the other end. Is it true, Dante? When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't your burden to carry. I made my choice, you or the business, and I chose you. I'll always choose you. He paused. Where are you? I'm coming to get you. The parking garage on 5th. Victoria's bringing me. I looked at the woman who'd orchestrated this elaborate lesson. And Dante, I need you to listen to me very carefully when I get home. Because we need to have a serious conversation about the difference between protection and partnership. All right. He sounded wary. I'll see you soon. After I hung up, Victoria gave me a small smile. You're different from Isabel. Stronger. More willing to fight for him instead of just accepting his protection. You knew her. Briefly. She was sweet, gentle, completely unprepared for Dante's world. Victoria started the car again. You're prepared. Maybe that makes the difference. Dante was waiting in the garage when we arrived. Marcus and his entire security team fanned out around him. He looked like he'd aged a year in the past 2 hours. His expression tight with barely contained emotion. I got out of Victoria's car, and he was there immediately, pulling me into his arms with almost bruising intensity. Never again, he muttered against my hair. Never put yourself at risk like that again. We'll talk about it at home. I pulled back enough to look at Victoria, who'd emerged from her car with hands raised to show she wasn't a threat. Thank you. For tonight. For telling me the truth. You're welcome. She looked at Dante. I'm done, Dante. Done with revenge. Done with trying to make sense of Richard's death. What happened tonight, it was closure. For both of us, I hope. Dante studied her for a long moment. You're sure? I'm sure. She smiled, sad and genuine. Take care of her. She's good for you. After Victoria left, Dante bundled me into his car with a gentleness that contradicted the tension in every line of his body. Once we were alone in the back seat, Marcus driving us home, he finally spoke. Before you say anything, I need you to understand. That you gave up your deal with Paolo because it would have meant pushing me away. Yes, Victoria told me. I took his hand. Why didn't you tell me yourself? Because I didn't want you to feel guilty for the choice I made. Didn't want you to think you had to choose between me and my legitimate future. His jaw tightened. I chose you, Olivia. I'll always choose you, regardless of the cost. That's the problem. I squeezed his hand. You can't make choices like that without me. We're partners, remember? That means we make hard decisions together, not you martyring yourself for my sake. So what would you have wanted me to do? Accept Paolo's terms. Push you away to secure business deals. I want you to trust me enough to tell me when there are impossible choices. To let me help you find third options. I shifted to face him fully. Paolo wanted you to distance yourself from me. Why didn't we consider actually doing that publicly while maintaining our private connection? Give him the appearance of what he wanted while keeping what matters. Dante stared at me. That would require you to endure public speculation about our marriage, probably cruel gossip, which I could have handled if it meant you didn't lose everything you've been building. That's what partnership means, Dante. Sharing the burden, making sacrifices together, not you carrying everything alone. He was quiet for a long moment, processing. I didn't think of it that way. Didn't consider that there might be a middle ground. Because you default to all or nothing. You're me. Business or personal. You don't see the gray spaces. Ironically, considering you've lived in them most of your life. A reluctant smile touched his lips. How are you always right? I'm not always right. But I am your partner, which means my input matters even in impossible situations. I leaned against him. No more secrets. No more protecting me from hard choices. From now on, we face everything together. Together, he agreed, pulling me close. Even when it's terrifying. Especially then. Chapter 8. Rebuilt in Light. The morning after Victoria's revelation, I woke to find Dante already awake, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Sunlight streamed through the windows, painting golden patterns across the bed. How long have you been staring at me? I asked, my voice still rough with sleep. Long enough to memorize every detail of your face in this light. He traced my cheekbone with gentle fingers. I keep thinking about what Victoria said. That you're stronger than Isabel, more willing to fight for us. And I realized she's right, but not in the way she meant. No. Isabel loved me despite who I was. You love me because of it, shadows and all. You see the darkness and choose to stand in it with me rather than trying to pull me into light I'm not ready for. His eyes held mine. That's not strength. That's courage. And I don't deserve it. You don't get to decide what you deserve, I said softly. That's my choice. And I choose you, Dante. Every day I choose you. He kissed me then, slow and deep, and I felt something shift between us. A final wall coming down, a last defense surrendered. When we broke apart, his forehead rested against mine. I need to tell you something. About Paolo's deal, about what I really gave up. I settled back against the pillows, giving him space to speak. He sat up, running a hand through his hair in a gesture I'd come to recognize as his tell when he was genuinely uncomfortable. The Singapore expansion wasn't just about business. It was my exit strategy, the final step in becoming completely legitimate. With those markets, I could sever all remaining ties to my old operations, pay off the last people who have leverage over me, walk away clean. He turned to look at me. Without it, I'm stuck in this limbo. Not fully criminal, not fully legitimate. Vulnerable to people like Paolo who know my history. The full weight of what he'd sacrificed settled over me. So you gave up your freedom. For me, I gave up one path to freedom. But you made me realize there might be others. He took my hand. Last night you suggested finding third options. I've spent this morning thinking about that. What if we renegotiated with Paolo? Not on his terms but ours. You think he'd listen? I think if we approach it right, together as partners, offering him something he wants more than petty revenge, we might find a solution that doesn't require either of us to sacrifice our future. What does he want more than revenge? Dante's smile turned calculating. Legitimacy. Respect. A way out of the shadows that doesn't involve prison or death. He wants what I'm building. So, we offer him a genuine partnership, but with conditions that protect us both. You trust him enough for that? No. But I trust us enough to manage it. He squeezed my hand. If we're truly partners, if we're building something together, then it's strong enough to withstand someone like Paolo. Maybe even transform him the way you've transformed me. The faith in his voice, the willingness to risk trust after so many betrayals. It was perhaps the greatest evidence of how much he'd changed. All right, I said. Let's offer Paolo redemption. Together. The meeting was scheduled for that afternoon at a restaurant Dante owned. Neutral territory that was nevertheless his domain. Paolo arrived exactly on time. His expression wary as he took in both of us seated together at the private table. This is unexpected, he said, settling into his chair. I assumed after last night's theatrics, we were done talking. Last night was complicated, Dante said evenly. But it clarified some things. Specifically, that both of us are tired of this dance. Are we? Paolo's eyes moved between us. Because from where I sit, you rejected my very generous offer and sent your wife to negotiate in bad faith. I sent my wife to show you that we're a united front, Dante corrected. That threatening her means threatening me, which is pointless when what you really want is a legitimate way forward. And you think you can offer me that? I know I can. Dante pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. Full partnership in 3 of my legitimate enterprises. Real equity, not just participation. Board seats, decision-making power, and clean money that won't bring authorities investigating. Paolo examined the documents with careful attention, his expression giving nothing away. This is more than what you offered before. Because this time, there are no conditions about distancing myself from Olivia. Dante's hand found mine on the table, a gesture of unity. But there are other conditions. Full transparency about your operations that need unwinding. Cooperation in transitioning them to legal alternatives. And an agreement that our families, mine and yours, are permanently off limits. I don't have family to protect. Then protect yourself by accepting this offer. I spoke up, drawing Paolo's attention. You're smart enough to see that the old ways are ending. Law enforcement is getting better at tracking shadow operations. The world is getting smaller, more transparent. You can either adapt or eventually get caught. Like I was before, Paolo said, something bitter in his voice. Like you were before, I agreed. But this time you'd have support in transitioning. Resources, connections, a real foundation to build on. Dante's offering you what he wished someone had offered him. A way out with your dignity intact. Paolo was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents, studying us. Finally he looked up. There's a catch. There's always a catch with you, Dante. The catch is that this only works if we trust each other. And trust requires transparency. Dante leaned forward. I'm willing to show you my books, my operations, everything I'm transitioning out of. But you have to do the same. Complete honesty about what you're involved in, who you're connected to, what needs to be carefully dismantled versus what can be handed off. That's not trust. That's mutual assured destruction. If either of us betrays the other, we both go down. Exactly. Dante's smile was cold. The best kind of insurance policy. Your secrets protect mine. Mine protect yours. And together, we build something neither of us could achieve alone. And if I refuse, then we're back to the old dance. Attacks and counterattacks, leverage and threats, until one of us ends up dead or in prison. Dante's voice hardened. But I think we're both tired of that game, Paolo. I think you're ready to do something different. Paolo set down the documents, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face. You really have changed. The old Dante would have just eliminated me as a threat. The old Dante didn't have something worth changing for. Dante glanced at me. Now I do. The question is whether you're ready to change too. I'll need time to review the specifics. Have my lawyers examine the partnership structure. Paolo stood, buttoning his jacket. But preliminarily, I'm interested. More than interested. Take the time you need, I said. But Paolo, if you agree to this, we're all in. Real partnership, real trust. No more games, no more threats. We succeed together or fail together. Those are high stakes, Mrs. Blackwell. The highest. But that's what makes it worth doing. After Paolo left, Dante pulled me close, pressing a kiss to my temple. That was incredible. You negotiated a peace treaty like you were discussing museum acquisitions. Same principles. Understand what all parties need, find common ground, present it in terms they can accept. I leaned into him. Think he'll really agree? I think he wants to. Whether he can overcome years of operating from a place of revenge and paranoia, that's the question. Dante turned me to face him. But we tried. We offered a real alternative. That's more than I've done for anyone in my position. Because you're becoming someone different. Someone better. Because I have a reason to be better. His hands framed my face. You gave me that, Olivia. You walked into my life with your defiant green eyes and your refusal to be controlled. And you made me want to be worthy of you. You were always worthy. You just didn't believe it. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of negotiations and legal discussions. Paolo's lawyers and Dante's lawyers hammered out the details of their partnership, while I focused on the museum exhibition that was finally opening. A comprehensive look at Renaissance portraiture that I'd been curating for months. The night of the exhibition opening, the museum glowed with carefully positioned lighting that made the paintings come alive. Patrons moved through the galleries, champagne glasses in hand, while I gave tours and answered questions about the artistic techniques we'd highlighted. You did beautifully, Dante murmured, appearing at my elbow during a brief break. He looked devastating in a tailored tuxedo, drawing admiring glances from several women in the vicinity. The exhibition is remarkable. Thank you. I'm just relieved it came together. I accepted the champagne he offered. Any word from Paolo? He signed this afternoon. We're officially partners. Dante's expression was complicated. Relief, caution, and something that might have been hope. Time will tell if it was the right decision, but at least we're trying something different. That's all we can do. Try. Mrs. Lee found us then, effusive in her praise of the exhibition and excited about the expanded arts education program we'd developed together. As she talked, I felt Dante's hand at the small of my back, a touch that had become natural, comfortable. This was our life now. The museum and the boardroom. Charity galas and business negotiations. Light and shadow existing in balance rather than conflict. I need to steal my wife for a moment, Dante said to Mrs. Lee with a charming smile. There's a painting I want to show her. He led me through the galleries to a quieter space, stopping in front of a Caravaggio, The Calling of St. Matthew. The dramatic use of light and shadow was quintessentially the artist's style, divine light breaking into human darkness. This one's always been my favorite, he said quietly. The way Caravaggio painted light as something almost violent, not gentle or soft, but forceful enough to transform darkness. Is that how you see what happened to us? Violent transformation. I see it as truth. He turned to face me. You didn't gently coax me into the light, Olivia. You crashed into my carefully controlled darkness and refused to let me hide. It was uncomfortable, terrifying, sometimes painful. But it was also real in a way nothing in my life had been for years. I don't know if I like being compared to violent light. I like it. His smile was soft. Because gentle wouldn't have worked on someone like me. I needed someone strong enough to meet me in the darkness and brave enough to drag me into the light, whether I wanted to go or not. And now, are you glad I dragged you? Now, I'm grateful every day that you crashed into my life and refused to leave. He pulled out a small box from his jacket pocket. Which brings me to something I've been wanting to do properly. My heart stuttered. Dante, I know we're already married. I know we did this backward, starting with a contract and finding love later. He opened the box, revealing a new ring, a diamond that caught the gallery lighting and threw it back in brilliant fractures. But I want to do this right. To ask you to marry me not because of debts or arrangements, but because I love you and want to spend my life with you. Tears blurred my vision. We're already married. Then marry me again. A real wedding this time, with your father walking you down the aisle and friends celebrating and all the romance I didn't give you the first time. His eyes held mine. Marry me, Olivia. Not because you have to, but because you want to. Yes. The word came out choked with emotion. Yes, I'll marry you again. As many times as you ask. He slipped the diamond onto my finger beside the emerald, both rings catching the light. Then he kissed me, there in the gallery surrounded by Renaissance masters, and I felt the rightness of it down to my bones. This was us. Light and shadow, art and commerce. Love born from the most unlikely arrangement. And it was perfect. We planned the wedding for 3 months later, in the spring when the estate gardens would be in full bloom. Unlike our first ceremony, this would be a real celebration. My father giving me away, Maya as my maid of honor, Marcus and the security team cleaned up an uncomfortable informal wear. The morning of the wedding, I woke in my old suite. Tradition demanded we spend the night apart, to find Eleanor bringing coffee and a small box. From Mr. Blackwell, she said with a knowing smile. He wanted you to have this before the ceremony. Inside was a letter and a small velvet pouch. I opened the letter first, recognizing Dante's precise handwriting. Olivia. 3 years ago, I stood in a lawyer's office and made a deal that I thought was purely transactional. I needed a wife to legitimize my business ventures. You needed security for your father. It was simple, clean, emotionally safe. I was an idiot. From the moment you signed that contract, you've been systematically dismantling every wall I'd built, challenging every assumption I'd made about who I was and what I was capable of feeling. You refused to accept the distance I tried to maintain. You pushed back when I tried to control you. You saw through my armor and loved the damaged person underneath. You saved me, Olivia. Not from my enemies or my past, but from myself. From a life lived in fear and isolation. From the prison of my own making. The pouch contains the ring I gave you at our first wedding, the emerald that was my mother's. I want you to choose which ring to wear today. The emerald represents our beginning, born from necessity. The diamond represents our choice, born from love. Either is perfect because both represent us, complicated, imperfect, and absolutely right. I'll be waiting at the altar, ready to marry you properly this time. Ready to promise you the forever you deserve. Yours in light and shadow, Dante. Tears streaming down my face. I opened the velvet pouch to find the emerald ring I'd worn since that first contract. He was giving me the choice, old or new, necessity or love. I slipped both rings into my bouquet. I would wear them both because our story needed both beginnings. The practical arrangement that had brought us together and the love that had transformed us. The ceremony was everything our first wedding hadn't been. My father walked me down the aisle, tears in his eyes, while 200 guests watched from chairs arranged in the garden. The arch where Dante waited was covered in white roses, just like that first time, but now they felt like promise rather than pretense. Dante's eyes never left me as I approached. His expression holding everything he couldn't say in front of this crowd. Love, yes. But also gratitude, wonder, and the kind of peace that came from finally laying down a burden you'd carried too long. The officiant, a judge who'd been a friend of Dante's father, spoke eloquently about the journey of marriage, about choosing each other every day, about love that deepened with time. But I barely heard the words. I was too focused on Dante, on the man who'd been my contractual husband and had become my partner, my love, my home. Dante, the judge said. Do you take this woman to be your wife? To love, honor, and cherish in light and in shadow, for all the days of your life? I do. His voice was steady, certain, holding no trace of the fear that had once driven him. I absolutely do. And Olivia, do you take this man to be your husband? To love, honor, and cherish in light and in shadow, for all the days of your life? I do. I squeezed his hands, feeling the rightness of this moment wash over me. With my whole heart I do. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you, again, husband and wife. The judge smiled. You may kiss your bride, Dante. And this time you can take your time about it. Laughter rippled through the crowd as Dante pulled me close. His kiss not the brief ceremony of our first wedding but a real declaration. A promise sealed with passion and tenderness, and the certainty of love earned rather than arranged. When we broke apart, I saw tears in his eyes. I love you, he whispered. My wife, my partner, my light. And I love you, I whispered back. My husband, my equal, my home. The reception was a blur of champagne and dancing, toasts from friends and family, and the kind of joy that comes from celebration rather than obligation. My father pulled me aside at one point, his expression serious. I need to tell you something, Livy. About that day you signed the contract. Dad. No, let me say this. He took my hands. I thought I was ruining your life, forcing you into marriage with a stranger because of my mistakes. I carried that guilt for months, watching you try to make the best of a bad situation. It wasn't a bad situation. Let me finish. He squeezed my hands. But watching you two today, seeing the way he looks at you and the way you look at him, I realize I didn't ruin your life. I gave you the chance to find something real, even if the beginning was unconventional. Oh, thank you. For making the best of it. For finding love in unexpected places. Dad. My voice cracked. You didn't ruin anything. You gave me the push I needed to find someone I never would have met otherwise. Someone who challenges me, protects me, loves me exactly as I am. If that came from your debts and desperate choices, then maybe those debts were a gift in disguise. He pulled me into a hug, and I felt the last piece of guilt he'd been carrying finally release. Later, as Dante and I had our first dance as a properly married couple, he murmured into my ear, happy, deliriously. I leaned back to look at him. Are you? No regrets about giving up your emotionally safe, contractual arrangement. My only regret is wasting time trying to maintain walls that were doomed from the start. He spun me gently. You would have crashed through them eventually. I just wish I'd let you in sooner. We had to do it our way. Slow, complicated, absolutely backward. Like everything about us. Exactly like us. As the evening wore on, I caught glimpses of our guests. Marcus actually smiling as he danced with one of the bridesmaids, Mrs. Lee in animated conversation with my father about expanding the arts program, even Paolo Valentini in the corner having what looked like a civil conversation with Dante's lawyer about the partnership terms. This was our life now. Messy, complicated, bringing together people from different worlds and finding ways to make it work. Not perfect but real. Not simple but worth it. Ready to leave? Dante asked as the party began winding down. I have a surprise for you. What kind of surprise? The good kind. Trust me. The surprise was a trip to Italy. 2 weeks in Tuscany where Dante had rented a villa overlooking rolling vineyards. We spent our days exploring medieval towns, eating incredible food, and making love in a centuries-old bed with views of cypress trees and olive groves. One afternoon, we sat on the terrace with wine and cheese, watching the sunset paint the landscape in gold and amber. I've been thinking, Dante said, about what comes next. For us. Next. The future. Children maybe. Growing old together. All the normal things I never thought I'd have. He took my hand. What do you want, Olivia? Really want, if we can build any life we choose. I thought about it, about the unexpected journey that had brought us here. I want to keep doing what we're doing. Building legitimate businesses, supporting the arts, making a difference. But also, I paused, surprised by my own realization. I want a family. Children who grow up knowing both the light and the shadows, who understand that the world is complicated but love makes it navigable. Children. He said it like he was tasting the word. I like that. Little versions of you running around, asking impossible questions and refusing to accept easy answers. Or little versions of you, intense and brilliant and occasionally infuriating. God help us if they get both our stubborn streaks. But he was smiling and I saw hope in his eyes. Do you think we're ready for that? Given everything, I think we're perfect for it. I shifted to face him fully. We know what real love looks like, Dante. Not perfect or easy, but honest and brave and willing to fight for each other. That's what we'll teach them. How to love despite fear. How to choose each other every day. How to build something beautiful even when the beginning is messy. He pulled me close, and we sat like that as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and violet. Two people who had started as strangers bound by contract and had become partners bound by choice. I love you, he said into the gathering dusk. More than I thought possible. More than I can articulate. I know. I pressed a kiss to his jaw. You show me every day. In the coffee you bring me each morning. In the way you consult me before making decisions. In how you've learned to trust that love doesn't have to end in loss. You taught me that. You and your stubborn refusal to let me hide. Someone had to. I smiled against his skin. Besides, hiding's overrated. Light's much more interesting. Says the woman who chose to love someone who lives half in shadow. Says the woman who understands that shadow makes the light meaningful. That we need both to truly see. I pulled back to meet his eyes. We're not perfect, Dante. We never will be. But we're real. And we're together. That's enough. More than enough. He kissed me as the stars began appearing overhead. It's everything. 6 months later, I stood in the bathroom of our estate, staring at a positive pregnancy test with shaking hands. We'd been trying for 3 months, hoping but not expecting it to happen so quickly. I found Dante in his study, reviewing contracts for the latest expansion of their now fully legitimate business empire. He looked up as I entered, his expression shifting to concern at whatever he saw on my face. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I moved into the room, holding the test behind my back. Actually, everything's very, very right. But I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how you'll react. He set down his papers, giving me his full attention. You're scaring me, Olivia. Don't be scared. Be happy. I pulled out the test, holding it up. We're going to have a baby. For a moment he just stared, processing. Then he was out of his chair, crossing to me in 2 strides, taking the test with trembling hands. A baby. His voice was rough with emotion. We're really. I watched joy and terror war across his features. Are you okay? I'm terrified, he admitted. Terrified I'll fail them, fail you, repeat the cycle of violence and fear I grew up with. His free hand came to rest on my still flat stomach. But also happier than I've ever been. 'Cause this is real, Olivia. Family. Something I thought I'd lost the right to when Isabel died. You never lost that right. You just needed time to heal before you could believe in it again. I covered his hand with mine. We're going to be amazing parents. Complicated, imperfect, but full of love. That's what matters. He pulled me close, careful already of the life growing inside me. I love you. Both of you. So much it terrifies me. Good. I leaned into him. Because perfect love isn't safe or easy. It's terrifying and brave and absolutely worth it. Worth it, he echoed. Yes, you're worth everything. As we stood there, wrapped in each other, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. From a desperate arrangement to a real marriage. From fear and control to trust and partnership. From separate lives to a shared future that now included new life. It hadn't been perfect. Had been messy, complicated, sometimes painful. But it had been real. And real, I had learned, was always better than perfect. Because perfect was safe and empty. Real was dangerous and full. And I would choose dangerous fullness over safe emptiness every time. Especially with Dante Blackwell by my side. His shadows and his light both, loving me the way I loved him. Completely, imperfectly, and without reservation. Together, we had turned an arranged marriage into something extraordinary. Together we would build a life, a family, a future that honored both our light and our shadows. Together we would prove that love could bloom even in the most unlikely soil, when two people were brave enough to choose it. Every single day. Epilogue. 5 years later. The smell of coffee and fresh pastries drifted through the estate's kitchen as I navigated around Mrs. Chen, who was preparing breakfast for what had become our regular Sunday family gathering. Through the window, I could see Dante in the garden with our daughter Elena, her dark curls bouncing as she helped him plant vegetables in the raised beds we'd added last spring. Mama! Our son Marco, named after the security chief who had become an unlikely godfather, barreled into the kitchen at full speed. His 3-year-old energy uncontainable. Papa says I can help dig. After breakfast, I said, catching him before he could launch himself at Mrs. Chen's pastry preparation. And after you wash your hands. But Mama. No arguments, young man. I tried to sound stern, but the effect was ruined by my smile. He looked so much like Dante, those same intense dark eyes, that same stubborn set to his jaw, that I couldn't help but soften. The doorbell chimed, announcing the arrival of my father and Maya. They'd been dating for 6 months now, an unexpected development that had started at Elena's 3rd birthday party and had become something surprisingly real. Grandpa! Marco forgot all about the garden, racing to the entrance hall where my father was already being tackled by Elena, who'd abandoned vegetable planting for more important pursuits. I followed more slowly, taking in the scene. My father looked younger than he had in years, the guilt and stress that had aged him finally lifted. Maya caught my eye and grinned, clearly still adjusting to the chaos that came with our family gatherings. Coffee, I offered as everyone settled in the living room. Please. I need fortification before the sugar rush hits. Maya accepted gratefully. How do you do this every week? Practice. And excellent staff. I smiled at Eleanor, who was already corralling the children toward the breakfast table with the kind of authority only she could manage. Dante appeared from the garden, dirt on his hands and a smile on his face. He'd changed so much in 5 years, the hard edges softened but not erased. He still had moments of control, still occasionally retreated into protection mode, but he'd learned to recognize it and adjust. More importantly, he'd learned that keeping our children safe didn't mean keeping them sheltered. Full house today, he said, pressing a kiss to my temple before greeting my father and Maya. Paolo sent his regrets. His daughter's dance recital is this afternoon. How's the partnership going? My father asked, still not quite comfortable with Paolo's presence in our lives but accepting it. Remarkably well. We just closed on the Barcelona property. Paolo's vision for transforming it into a cultural center is actually brilliant. Dante settled on the arm of my chair, his hand finding my shoulder in the casual intimacy that had become natural. He's nothing like the man I knew 5 years ago. People can change, Maya observed, glancing meaningfully at my father, when they have the right motivation. Speaking of change, my father said, clearing his throat nervously. Maya and I have an announcement. I straightened, suddenly alert to the undercurrent of excitement in his voice. Dad, we're engaged. He pulled out a small box, showing us the ring he'd already given her. I know it's quick, and I'm probably too old to be getting married again, but nothing, I interrupted, pulling him into a hug. This is wonderful. Maya's family now. I was already family, Maya said, returning my hug. But now it's official. Plus, someone needs to keep an eye on your father. Make sure he doesn't gamble away the gallery. That was one time, my father protested, but he was grinning. And I learned my lesson. Dante raised his coffee cup in a toast. To new beginnings. And to family however we find it. We drank to that, and I felt the rightness of this moment. 5 years ago I couldn't have imagined this. My father happy and in love, my former arranged husband now my true partner, children filling our home with chaos and joy, even Paolo Valentini becoming a legitimate business associate rather than a threat. Mama, can we show them the art room? Elena appeared at my elbow, vibrating with excitement. She'd inherited my love of art along with Dante's intensity, a combination that led to paintings covering every available surface. After breakfast, I said. But yes, you can give a full tour. The meal was cheerful chaos. Children interrupting, adults trying to have conversations over the noise, Mrs. Chen bringing out more food than we could possibly eat. This was family now. Messy, loud, imperfect, and absolutely perfect. After breakfast, as promised, Elena dragged everyone to what had once been a formal sitting room and was now her art studio. Paintings covered the walls, some recognizable, some abstract explosions of color that only a 5-year-old could create. This one's Grandpa, she said, pointing to a portrait that actually bore a reasonable resemblance. And this one's Mama at the museum. And this one's Papa when he's thinking really hard. The last painting showed Dante in profile, his expression serious, and I was struck by how well Elena had captured him. The intensity, yes, but also the love beneath it. It's beautiful, Principessa, Dante said, crouching to her level. You're very talented. Like Mama. Elena beamed. She teaches me. We teach each other, I corrected, ruffling her curls. Art is about seeing the world differently, and you definitely do that. While the adults admired Elena's work, Marco tugged on Dante's hand. Papa, can we do the thing? What thing? My father asked. Marco and I have been practicing, Dante explained, pulling our son close. He wanted to learn some Italian. What followed was Marco reciting a short Italian nursery rhyme, stumbling over the pronunciation but earnest in his effort. Dante corrected gently, patient in a way that would have shocked anyone who knew him before our marriage. This was who he'd become. Still intense, still protective, but channeling it into being present rather than controlling. Teaching our children, building relationships, creating a life that honored both his shadows and his light. Later, after my father and Maya left and the children were down for afternoon naps, Dante and I found ourselves alone on the terrace with fresh coffee and the Sunday papers. Your father seems happy, Dante observed, scanning the business section. Really happy. He is. Maya's good for him. I set aside the arts review I'd been reading. Did you ever think we'd end up here? 5 years ago, when we made that arrangement. No. He folded his paper, giving me his full attention. I thought I was entering a convenient business transaction that would make my life easier. I didn't expect it to completely remake who I am. Do you regret it? The remaking? Not even for a moment. He pulled me from my chair to his lap, settling me against him. I regret the wasted time trying to maintain distance. I regret not recognizing sooner what we could become. But the end result? Never. Even the messy parts. The arguments and the compromises and learning to share control. Especially those parts. They made us real. His arms tightened around me. We've built something remarkable, Olivia. Not just a marriage or a family, but a life that matters. The foundation work, Paolo's transformation, the arts programs. We're leaving the world better than we found it. Very philosophical for a Sunday afternoon. I'm allowed to be philosophical. I'm a reformed criminal turned legitimate businessman and family man. Philosophy comes with the territory. His tone was light, but his eyes were serious. I got a call yesterday. From a journalist doing a piece on second chance programs for people leaving organized crime. I tensed slightly. What did they want? An interview. About how I transitioned from the shadows to legitimacy. How I found motivation to change. He pressed a kiss to my shoulder. I said no, obviously. Our privacy matters more than publicity. But it made me think about how we got here. Through a lot of hard work and uncomfortable conversations. Through you refusing to let me hide. He turned me to face him. 5 years, and you're still pushing me to be better. Still challenging my assumptions. Still refusing to accept easy answers. Someone has to keep you honest. And Elena's already following in your footsteps. Did you hear her arguing with Marco this morning about the proper way to plant seeds? She's 5 and already knows she's right about everything. I laughed. She gets that from both of us. You're not exactly known for backing down from your position. Fair point. He smiled, that rare, genuine expression that still made my heart skip. Though I've learned when to concede. Usually around the 3rd time you give me that look that says I'm being stubborn for no reason. The look is very effective. The look is terrifying. But he was still smiling. Almost as terrifying as realizing I'm raising a daughter who will inevitably use it on me. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the afternoon light paint patterns across the water. 5 years of marriage. Real marriage, not just contractual arrangement. And I still found new things to love about him. The way he made coffee each morning. How he read to the children in Italian, teaching them his mother's language. The careful attention he paid to everyone in his orbit, no longer controlling but genuinely caring. I have something to tell you, I said, deciding the moment was right. And I'm not sure how you'll react. He tensed slightly. That's never a good opening. It's not bad. Just unexpected. I took his hand, placing it on my stomach. We're going to need to expand the art room. Make room for another easel. It took him a moment, then his eyes widened. You're pregnant. 3 months. I wanted to wait until we were past the risky period before telling anyone. I watched emotions play across his face. Joy, fear, wonder. Are you okay? Okay. He let out a breathless laugh. I'm terrified and thrilled in equal measure. Another child. Another person to love and worry about and try not to control. You've gotten much better at that last part. With extensive coaching from you. His hand spread across my stomach, protective and gentle. When? Late spring. April, probably. Another spring baby. He kissed me softly. Elena will be excited. She's been asking for a sister. She might get one. Or another brother for Marco. Either way, they'll be perfect. He rested his forehead against mine. You're perfect. This life we've built, it's more than I ever dreamed possible. Even though it started from a desperate arrangement. Because it started that way. If we'd met conventionally, I would have been too guarded, too controlled. I needed the contract to trick myself into letting you in. And once you were in, he shook his head. Once you were in, you dismantled every defense I had. Good. Kissed him. Because those defenses were keeping you from living. And now I'm not just living, I'm thriving. We're thriving. His hand moved to cup my face. Thank you. For not giving up on me when I was determined to keep everyone at a distance. For seeing possibilities I couldn't see. For making me believe that love didn't have to end in tragedy. It doesn't. Sometimes it ends in coffee on the terrace and children napping and another baby on the way. Smiled. Not very dramatic for a dark romance, is it? It's perfect for us. We had enough drama in the beginning. Now we get the happy ending. Not ending, I corrected. Happy continuing. We're still writing our story. Then let's make it a good one. He kissed me again, deeper this time. Full of art and love and children who ask impossible questions. Full of partnership and compromise and morning coffee. Full of everything I never knew I needed until you showed me. That evening, after dinner and baths and bedtime stories, Dante and I stood in the nursery doorway watching Elena and Marco sleep. Elena sprawled across her bed, one arm thrown over her favorite stuffed elephant. Marco curled in a ball, his dark hair tousled. Hard to believe we made them, I whispered. We make beautiful things together. Dante's arm came around my waist. Children, businesses, a life neither of us planned but both of us chose. No regrets. Not a single one. He turned me to face him. You know what's extraordinary? I used to think love was a liability. Something that made you vulnerable, gave enemies leverage, ended in pain. But loving you, loving them, it's made me stronger, not weaker. It's given me something worth protecting, worth changing for, worth building a better world around. That's what love does when it's real. It transforms. It terrifies. That too. I smiled up at him. But you face the terror every day and choose love anyway. That's what makes you brave. I'm not brave. I'm just smart enough to hold on to the best thing that ever happened to me. We moved to our bedroom, the one we'd shared for 5 years now. The bed where we'd made love countless times, argued occasionally, always reconciled. The space that was truly ours, where the damaged businessman and the defiant art historian had become partners, parents, best friends. Do you remember our first night here? I asked as we settled into bed. How awkward it was. You in your wing, me in mine, both of us trying to maintain careful distance. I remember thinking you were dangerous, that letting you close would be a mistake. He pulled me against him, our bodies fitting together with familiar ease. I was right about the dangerous part. You completely upended my life. Good. I kissed his shoulder. Your life needed appending. It did. Though I'm glad you stuck around to help me rebuild it. His hand traced lazy patterns on my back. I love you, Olivia Blackwell. My wife, my partner, my home. And I love you, Dante Blackwell. My husband, my equal, my heart. I tilted my head up to meet his eyes. Thank you for taking a chance on an arranged marriage with a woman you didn't know. Thank you for taking a chance on a damaged man with too many shadows and not enough light. He kissed me softly. Though you brought enough light for both of us. We brought it together. Your shadows made my light meaningful. My light made your shadows bearable. I settled against him. That's what partnership is. Not fixing each other but complementing. Making each other better while accepting each other as we are. Wise words from someone who crashed into my life and refused to leave. Someone had to crash in. You certainly weren't inviting anyone. And now I can't imagine life without you crashing through my carefully maintained walls. His arms tightened. You, Elena, Marco, the baby on the way, you're everything. My entire world. Not your entire world. You have the business, the foundation work, Paolo's partnership. Those are important. But you're essential. He pressed a kiss to my forehead. The difference between living and merely existing. I existed before you. Now I live. We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. Two people who had started as strangers and had become everything to one another. The arranged marriage that had become a love story. The business transaction that had transformed into a life partnership. Tomorrow we would wake up and do it all again. The morning coffee, the chaos of children, the careful balance of work and family. The 1,000 small choices that made a life, made a marriage, made love real rather than just romantic. But tonight, we simply held each other and marveled at the journey that had brought us here. From a lawyer's office to this bedroom. From a contract to forever. From fear to love. It hadn't been perfect. It had been messy and complicated and sometimes painful. But it had been real. And real, we had learned, was always better than perfect. Because real was brave and honest and willing to change. Real was choosing each other every day despite fears and flaws. Real was building something beautiful from the most unlikely beginning. Real was us. And I wouldn't trade our complicated, imperfect, absolutely real love story for any fairy tale ever written. Not for anything in the world. Then.